everybody. I'm Aaron Simmons. I'm a professor of philosophy and the president of the Soren Kierkegaard Society, USA. I am here to ask you a few questions. Do you ever find yourself struggling with who you're becoming? Wrestling with how to be a Christian in the context of a church that is really, really hard to navigate? Do you find yourself trying your best to live faithfully and yet struggling with a world that says all that really matters is external success? Well, if you say yes to any of those questions, then I've got the class for you. Trip Fuller and I are going to be doing a 6-week intensive course on the work of Soren Kierkegaard. It's called Getting Lost and Finding Faith, Walking with Kierkegaard. Because as we know, getting lost sucks. But getting lost is also usually what allows us to discover things we otherwise might have missed along the way. So maybe we need to get lost more in order to rethink who we are, and where we're trying to go. It matters that we take seriously what everybody else takes for granted. And in this class, we're going to unpack Kierkegaard, this melancholy Danish thinker, but who was fully invested in what it means to live well, what it means to struggle toward becoming, and what it means to love God in a world where the name of God is often not more than just a way of reinforcing our own social power. An influence on Dietrich Bonhoeffer, an influence on other thinkers who have helped us reconsider who we are and why it matters to think through these questions so carefully. I hope you'll join us. I can't wait to think with you and learn from you. It's going to be a lot of fun. Take care. We'll see you online soon.
What is up, theology nerds? This is Trip, and you're listening to Homebrewed Christianity, where since the year of 2008, we've been bringing you ideological ingredients, interviews with some of the best scholars up in their ivory towers, and where do we take them? Right into your earbuds so you can chew on it, metaphorically speaking. And today on the podcast is a professor of Old Testament at Luther Seminary in, the Twin Cities. He's also part of the Working Preacher project. You can hear podcasts and get regular updates as they go through the lectionary at workingpreacher.org. He is the author of a whole bunch of books and articles, but most importantly, the Homebrewed Christianity Guide to the Old Testament. And here he is. We're talking about the Bible, all those things that when you go to seminary and you take a biblical studies course, things that you just know that sometimes don't always appear in a successful Sunday school environment. But what are the things that academics know and are just kind of common knowledge after you've gone through seminary that don't always trickle down? That's what we're going to talk about. But also, we were just having a lot of fun. So this is a long, fun, nerdy Bible conversation. Before we jump in, I just want to remind everyone that this podcast is the product of, yes, me and some amazing people that help it. Also, it's supported and made possible by the amazing members of the Homebrewed community. They went to homebrewedcommunity.com. They signed up. They donate each month. They join the private Facebook group. They get the super secret members-only podcast feed with tons of material in it, including the Introduction to Hebrew Bible class with, guess what? Walter Brueggemann. Yeah, that's all in. There's a bunch of other stuff along with whatever classes we happen to be doing at the moment. You don't have to download them. You don't even have to go anywhere. It just shows up like right now. You're getting the sessions from the class I'm doing with Diana Butler-Bass and Brian McLaren, looking at the 20th anniversary of 9/11, how Christianity's changed in the last 20 years. If you went to Homebrewed Community, remember, you didn't have to go to ohgodwhatnow.net to join the class, to pay what you can. No, it shows up just like another podcast episode, ready for your downloading and enjoyment, putting it right in your earbuds. Anyway, shout out to all the Homebrewed community members and each one of you who listen and then share this episode with your nerdy Bible friend. All right? here is my buddy, Rolf Jacobson, doing a little podcasting. Enjoy. Smoochy poochies. Hello, Homebrewed Christianity listeners. This is Trip, and today on the podcast, return guest and author of the Homebrewed Christianity Guide to the Old Testament, which I'm sure you all have multiple copies sitting under your bed. If you're not going to read the Bible, then you should read Rolf Jacobson's book. And he's back on the podcast. We are going to do something exciting.
Let's do it.
This is theological clickbait. You know, Rolf, this is we're going to give you the 5 most offensive things you learn in seminary Old Testament courses that are kind of awesome. Oh yeah. I'm excited about this. And now for those that are currently going to purchase the Homebrewed Christianity Guide to the Old Testament because they didn't know this existed yet, and they're like, I love this podcast, I'm already going to like this episode, who would use a title like that? Then maybe you want to say a bit about yourself. Here's one. When people show up for Introduction to the Hebrew Bible and are doing it for the first time, what's the lecture you're going to do that you're like, if this gets you excited, I will actually keep up with your entire ministry career because you're like one of my people? What's that, Rolf? Like, what's that class lecture?
So like one from the whole semester or the first lecture?
No. Any in the year. Like, you know, when you're,
yeah.
If this is my lecture and you get pumped, you on your inside, you mean you're not going to tell them this, obviously. You're like, you are one of my favorites. I can already tell.
Yeah. You know, if it had to be one, I think it might be the lecture on the 10 Commandments. Because here's my take on the 10 Commandments, which I got from my doctor father, Pat Miller, which is the 10 Commandments are laws for free people. God frees them from Egypt, frees them from slavery, and then says, here is how free people live. Free people don't kill, they don't steal, they don't commit adultery. And then, but if you've never been freed from anything, you're just not going to get it. If you haven't been freed, then you're going to think these rules are there to impede your freedom. What do you mean I can't steal? I'm free, right? And these are a gift. So think about the Sabbath commandment, especially. I hear back from students years later about the Sabbath commandment because slaves in Egypt didn't get any days off, right? There was no, okay, today's a day off. No, it isn't. Today's a day to work harder. Get up. And so God gives them this law. Every 7 days, you have to not work. And they're like, okay, you're not going to have to repeat that one. Every 7 days, I get to not work, right? And how good news is that to free people? And so I think that's the one. And you can see the light come on from some people. They're like, wow, I never thought about the fact that before we had the labor union movement, work conditions were off. God is giving us the first labor law, pretty cool.
And you got to admit, the 10 Commandments are a lot better than Pharaoh's commands because nobody wants to be told, build more bricks.
Yeah.
And
without straw.
Yeah.
You
don't even need straw. But so one other question I think it might be fun for people just to get, a little concept of where you're coming from. Who was the professor you had growing up, or maybe Sunday school teacher or person where because of the way both the text, the intellect and faith and all that stuff got wrapped up that you said, I want to be a pro nerd. I want to be that person that gets to introduce the parts of the Bibles everyone know is secretly just about Jesus, but they've never actually read them before. I want to be that guy.
Yeah, like most of us, there's too many. My dad, growing up, my dad would preach on the Old Testament from time to time. He's not one of those Lutheran preachers who, I'm Lutheran, by the way, who thinks, there's some Lutheran preachers that think they have to preach on the gospel reading every Sunday. That's the only choice. My dad was never like that. So he would preach on these Old Testament stories, and I could track those as a kid. I mean, I could track, it's wow, Elijah's going up to heaven in a what? Where do I get a fiery chariot? So I think it started there, and I was always going to go into New Testament. Even when I was out of seminary for 4 years, and I went up to, I was going to go into New Testament because of my teacher, Don Jewell. Really, I think that was the main influence. But then I said to my teacher, Jim Limburg, who was an Old Testament scholar, Psalms, and who happens to be my godfather, where should I apply for grad school? And he knew I was interested in New Testament. And he said, there's only one place, Princeton Seminary, where you will study with Pat Miller and Dennis Olson. And it kind of knocked me back, and I said, but those are Old Testament scholars. He goes, yeah, I know. And he walked away. And I went home and just thought about it. Why would he do that to me? And I thought, you know what? He's right. I'm going to go to, and so I went to Princeton and studied with Pat Miller and Dennis Olson, studied the Psalms. So I think Jim Limburg was that moment. He elected me. It was foreordained in God's knowledge that at that moment, Jim would elect me to be an Old Testament teacher.
That's a high quality story. And it was a positive one. Like if I had answered the question, it would have all been really negative interactions I had where the theological questions someone gave me, their answers were so bad that I was like, what? No. I mean, anyway.
Yes. I'll tell you something. Some people go into our field because they have been hurt by the church, and therefore they hate the Bible. And so their career is to undo something they hate. I don't know why you would do that. I don't know why you would spend your life working with something you hate. Wouldn't just getting rich be a better option? If you're going to do something you hate, get rich.
Well, are you telling me that if someone like picked up Ugaritic as a side gig, they wouldn't like be bringing in the dollars?
Yeah, Ugaritic. It's an ancestor language of Hebrew. Trivia: the first alphabet. The other languages around they wrote in syllables, but Ugaritic is the first alphabet. And you can't get rich on Ugaritic.
So my best friend, Chad Crawford, who started the podcast with me a long, long time ago, when we were in divinity school, he had maxed out on all the Greek, Hebrew, Latin, and he taught himself Ugaritic and then sent translations to James Crenshaw at Duke because we're at Wake Forest. And his these essays he did for him for an independent study, doing Ugaritic and Hebrew and things on the Psalms. And I was like, where'd you learn Ugaritic? He's like, well, the last 3 weekends I've basically sat in the library and I started to figure it out. I thought, wouldn't it be fun to try to learn a language that's related to other ones you've learned, but not exactly all on your own? And I was like, when I think of the word fun, that is absolutely not there. Like, I think I know enough that I just want to know a language that no one ever helped. Like
Marvin Pope, who was the Semitic language teacher at Yale Divinity School, said, without intending it to be funny, he said, once you know all the Semitic languages, learning any one of them is easier. That's your friend probably would have gone, yeah.
Yeah, he was one of those people liking languages. I'm not already in that category, but then being like, I'm working on my 7th because, yeah. Now, we're going to talk about the 5 most offensive things you learned in seminary about the Old Testament that are kind of awesome. As someone who has introduced kind of critical biblical reflection, and it's in the context of a seminary, like having done that a bunch of times from people coming from different places, before you get to the offensive part, like what are the deepest joys as someone who shares the resonance with faith, but also so many people may not know these things, which is the kind of the gimmick of this discussion. What's the joy as a teacher of getting to do both with them?
Well, you got to understand one thing about being a scripture professor. The most fun part of our job is wrecking people's favorite Bible verses. I mean, nothing gives me more joy than to be able to take Jeremiah 29:11 or whatever it is. I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord, plans for good and not evil, to give you a future with hope. So you put it in context, and the Babylonians are writing to Jeremiah and said, we didn't listen to you the last 30 years, but now that our ass is wound up in exile in Babylon, we're going to listen. How should we live now? And in that context, Jeremiah says at the end of it, I know the plans I have for you. That is, you as a community, because the you is y'all. We don't talk that way in Minnesota, but I think it's one of the deficiencies of our language, and we have many. By the way, I'm fluent in both official languages of Minnesota, which is English and broken English. I'm fluent. And so
in our South basically has y'all and biscuits going for it. Well, like when you leave the South, when you get breakfast, all the bread items are like significantly lower grade than just biscuits and grits.
I know, man.
You're like, I don't want eggs and bacon and cheese on toast. Why do you have toast when you have a biscuit? You can fit cream and butter into that same amount of flour. So the carbs are basically the same. That's the way I see it.
I totally agree. The only thing close is the English muffin, because again, it's got all those crannies. I know you live in Scotland now. My dad, when he visited Scotland, once asked for an English muffin for breakfast, and the waiter said, "Please don't swear so early in the morning." Apparently,
yeah. The intensity is significant. In the States, they actually would be in the same state. It's like San Francisco and Los Angeles. They really don't like each other until it comes to the other 49 states. Then they really rally.
Yeah.
And then we'll use the cool stuff the other one does. So you're in Hollywood, but you're like, yeah, but also Apple,
Yeah, right.
But one of the things that story makes me think of, and it is just one of, I think, the fun parts of teaching is there's a movement in it, right? So when someone comes to this thing they cherished, and in a kind of simple context, when you put it in context, initially it's oh, you took away my pacifier, or right. My favorite toy.
I thought God had a plan for my life.
Yeah, and you're nope. I'm not saying there's absolutely no intentions to it. Right. I'm just saying if you are losing sleep about its scripted nature, it's all good. It's all good.
Here's another one though. Today is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. I know people who it's their favorite Bible verse, and it was my dad's best friend, and when he died, his wife gave the plaque. Today is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it, to me, right? So I have it in my office, and it's wrong. What the Psalm says is, today is the day that the Lord has acted, because it's part of an entrance to liturgy, Psalm 118, where the person comes to the temple and says, see, God, save me. And then the crowd says, you know what? You're right. Today's the day the Lord has acted. Let us rejoice and be glad in him. Not in it. You're supposed to be glad in the Lord's action. And so I get students that say, I'm still mad at you for taking that Bible verse away from me. I'm like, but it's actually better. It means God's active in daily life, and we rejoice in God, not just the new day.
I want you to know, I'm totally going to borrow that. That's a high quality sermon material. And you look, there's this weird overlap of process theologians and pious Lutherans.
Yeah, they
all enjoying the eventual nature of the arrival of grace. And
boom.
And Andy Root and I are going to do a class this summer.
I know. Can I take it?
Yeah, as long as you show up at some point to tell us how wrong we are. But I've had 2 emails already from people that are podcast listeners that have read his stuff, and they're like, I really hope y'all work out why it is when both of you talk about how God, like the event and stuff with your, like, I like to read postmodern philosophy. I'm weirdly pious given what I infer from your progressive conclusions, but somehow I'm like, yeah. Like if y'all could work your stuff out, it would be great. I've gotten multiple messages like this, so it got me thinking. I'm like, what's the thing? And it's that, like, this is the day where God has arrived, right? Like if you think of an event, let us rejoice and be glad in what? It's not the it of like linear time and temporality necessarily. It's that, like, in this very moment, like,
in him,
God showed up, right? Like,
yeah.
And what is the wake of the event? That's where gladness is, right? Like the rock flies through, you got all the quivering stuff. If you want the joy, you got to get in the wake.
But think about it. I mean, I know we had a secretary, they'd call them administrative assistants now, but this is back when I was in seminary, and I worked for a little while in the admissions office till they realized I scared people away. We had a secretary who'd come into the office in the morning, turn on the light, and say, with the full conviction of a gospel believer, "This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it." And because she was, we were, right? So I couldn't take that verse away from her. But I know pastors that start worship that way. And then when they learn that it doesn't actually say that, it doesn't mean that, that can be a hard one.
Well,
best part of my job.
I get it. But if God is where we live, move, and have our being, then that text is a declaration of the sacramental potential of each moment of becoming.
Okay, hold on. See, this is what systematic theologians do. That text is a declaration of the sacramental nature of each moment of becoming.
No, I'm saying
I'm going to get that on a tattoo.
It's a potential one.
That's awesome.
Because the sacramental nature of each moment of becoming would be whether or not one's existential structure in the community embodiment is related to, right, that the possibility in that moment's becoming the advent of the divine arrival. There's your...
Say that again, though, because it was so good. That the text is a declaration of the sacramental potential.
This is the event of the Lord, right? Like,
yeah.
It's a happening. The Lord's made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. It's kind of like, let us vibe, hum, resonate with it, right? Like where you're showing up existentially is that register of existence that hums in the gratitude created by the arrival of God. Then it's like, woo, and the rock through the water, the wake of the event, you're sitting in it. Like that's
awesome. Yeah.
And so if the text is about an event, then the question is, like when you say this at the beginning of worship, right? It's not that worship is an aberration of the world as it is. Worship is a practice of attentiveness, dedicating oneself to the hum that's always there, that sacramental reality. And it's not like there's a day that isn't the day, but this is the day.
Yeah.
It's a participatory statement.
I like it.
The
That's
potential
brilliant.
of a moment.
And that's my next sermon. I mean, that's if every moment is that, because systematic theologians such as yourself like to dwell in these big abstractions. And one of them,
entire classes on it.
I know, right? Like, so God, I learned this from my now retired colleague Patrick Kiefert, that God sustains all creation from moment to moment. This is the dogma of creation, which we're going to talk about. So that sustaining, that energy is all around us. God holds the atoms together from moment to moment. Well, so you go from that big abstraction to this text and our dawning awareness. And I think you wrote somewhere, I was following it on the web, probably saw it on social media somewhere recently, about why some people are capable of being attentive and aware then of the inbreaking presence of God. And some people, even though they long for it, are simply unable to be aware of it. Did you draw any perfect conclusions?
I feel like I would be out of a job if I had perfect conclusions, but
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, that'd be depressing when it goes to like that Kierkegaardian wager. Like, do you want to seek it or do you want to know it? And you're like, oh, know it. No. I want to be going steady though. But when it goes to how individuals with different intentions and then different practices show up, one of the things that actually makes one able to acknowledge, recognize, interpret, or be seduced into a false hermeneutic, depending on your level of
skepticism.
Of hermeneutical suspicion. Situations and practices actually make things available to you. And This isn't like, even I'm saying it probably from a more postmodern way than others, but like someone like Cardinal Newman says something similar, right? Like when he's talking about the nature of belief, he's like, well, like if you're asking me, I don't know if God exists, and then you aren't doing things that help you relate to the world as if God exists, like the fact you're not resonating, right? Like if you're using the image of the text, like humming with the wake of the event, and engaging in that, like, you shouldn't be surprised. And everyone knows how, like, when you cultivate different habits, rhythms, and the community you're in and the shared narrative they have for understanding experience, it just changes things.
Yeah.
And so one of the reasons I've always liked at churches, this is the day the Lord has made, is it's ritualized. And then part of the thing you see in people that's an important part of the beginning of worship is then it becomes a beginning part of their day, like your coworker you mentioned.
Yeah.
And so when they say that, like, this is obviously Tripp, the philosophical theologian, doing hermeneutics as to how a particular kind of determinate religious form of practice is interpreted, is this day the Lord said, let us rejoice and be glad at it. When they say that, they're saying, like, I'm walking into work. We're going to do the same crap we did every day, except this day, just like every day, is something important. I am trying to sing this and invite you into a level of intentionality in the mundane that in the very midst of this habitual, systemic, like, judge and assess by whatever alternative values. And yet, you know, when I'm in the stapler room with Rolf, this is the day the Lord's made, and we could connect. You could listen to your coworker. You could be more patient, all those kinds of things. And that's all about the hum. And when do we know the hum the best? I think as Christians, it's when an actual shitty human says, this is my body and this is my blood, right? Like in the Eucharistic moment when, like, betrayer, denier, and everybody's there and says, yet keep doing this. Because the most true thing about you is you belonged when I knew what you were about to do, and you belong after it. And anyway, so that was like, I was about to lapse into preaching.
Well, I think you did, and it's welcome. It's, but it's
you're the one with the preaching podcast.
Yes, I am. It's not this fun usually. Don't tell my colleagues I said that.
I don't know. Do you want to do a power rankings of your favorite co-hosts on a podcast? No.
Yes, we will rank. We'll rank the podcast. No, so what you just said though is so important, right? Which is that I'll put another systematic theologian who died a couple years ago named Mark Colden. He never wrote much, so you probably never heard of him. I think he only wrote one book, and it was on the Lutheran understanding of vocation called The Called Life or something like that. But he said, we do not sing the hymns in our hymn book because they say what we mean. By singing them, our lives come to mean what they say, right? And I think that's what you're saying, is so that when you have this ritual of gathering together, and the way we gather together, right? There's not a fast lane. There's not a slow lane. There's not a guest's first lane. Everybody gets up and is treated the exact same way at the altar of the Lord. There's no preferential treatment because, like, it says in Acts, right? Truly understand that, everyone is equal here in the kingdom. And so that's the way we enact it. And the only argument then that we get in is whether the hosts have to commune first, the host being the priest, right? Or last. This is a big argument, which is, so in my tradition, the argument that the preacher communes first because you can't have an uncommuned person communing people, which never made any sense to me. When you serve people at your table, you serve yourself last, right? I'm at my dining room table here, and so that's this is the deep theological argument within Lutheranism, and I'm a serve the host last guy.
So, like, is the both and move? Everyone gets served before you finish eating. Is that like the
metaphor is stretched at that point?
Yeah, well, I'm excited because we get to have the 5 most offensive things you learn in seminary about the Old Testament that are also kind of option that are also kind of awesome. So, number 1,
nobody wrote anything.
Yeah, because I read it. So that is that's already like
so. When I taught undergraduate, one of the other professors got at a and she quit the field. Maybe because of this comment. At the end of the semester, the evaluation from the student, what did you learn in this class? Old Testament, right? Nobody wrote anything. And so, of course, the point, that was depressing for her because, right, they didn't learn anything in this class except that. So if you grew up in a traditional Jewish or Christian family, you may have learned Moses wrote the Pentateuch, right? David wrote the Psalms. Solomon wrote Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Songs. Jeremiah wrote Lamentations. Isaiah was one book by a prophet from the 8th century BCE, right? And you can go on, right? Yeah. And then you get to class, and they go, "Well, Moses didn't write the Pentateuch because he dies in book 5, and the book keeps going." And then we don't.
Well, it depends on how effective the Holy Ghost is when you're transcribing what she's saying.
Yes, exactly. She is wily, that one. But so you learn in a critical seminary, you learn that, and my colleague Cameron Howard just is coming out with a book. I think it gets published like next week from when we're recording this, where she's trying to argue that these background facts are actually really important for understanding the authority and the timeliness of the Old Testament. So you learn that the Pentateuch, for example, is a source that was edited together from multiple original sources. And so the standard theory is JEDP, right? J is a source that throughout the Pentateuch, that source refers to God as Yahweh because the Germans invented the theory and the sound Yah in German is J. We would say YEDP, I think is what we should say. E, Elohim, the word for God is Elohim until Exodus 3, when God says, by the way, my name's Yahweh. And then after that, the E source and the P source both do use Yahweh. They don't continue to use Elohim. And then the D source, which is the core of the book of Deuteronomy. But here's where it gets really awesome, actually. So at first, you're like, nobody wrote anything. David didn't write the Psalms. I don't think David wrote very many of the Psalms. Maybe some of the really old ones he did. I think he was a psalmist. He was a poet of some sort. Kyle McCarter thinks, like, if you go to the book of 2 Samuel, right after his friend Jonathan dies, there's a song lamenting the death of Jonathan, and Kyle McCarter thinks that's a song David wrote. There are critical scholars who believe David did write some of the material in the Psalms, but he didn't write all the Psalms that say of David at the top. That doesn't mean in Hebrew by David, right? So I have students that think I'm just a heretic. I actually had one of them tell another student, "Yeah, Jacobson's just a heretic for believing that David didn't write the Psalms." But here's what's awesome about it. Okay, Moses leads the people out of Egypt. and they develop laws before they develop the ability to write. So all of these things live on in oral tradition. Then the nation splits in half, right? In 922 after Solomon. It was the original Tea Party, right? The northern tribes come and say, lower our taxes. And Solomon's son goes, I'm going to raise your taxes. And they go, we're out of here. So the nation splits. Well, each nation then develops the oral tradition that they've got. And so, of course, you get J is the southern source. E is the northern source. But then, after the fall of the northern kingdom, those northern sources come down and they're merged together. They're edited together with the southern sources. So you're preserving the religious tradition of the whole people, even through this split. And the best part is, here's a story I never heard growing up, and I never heard it in seminary, and I never heard it till I got to my PhD program. The story of Josiah's Reformation. And you probably know the story well, but I had never even heard this story. And I get out to Princeton, and everybody's talking about Josiah's Reformation, and I'm the guy pretending to know what they're talking about, right?
Is he like he's like the king everyone uses as like the best king?
Yeah.
Okay. That's why I that's about all I know, but I'm sure he had him read Torah and
so around
like no idolatry or taxing on the Sabbath. I don't know.
Yeah. So in the year 620, he's already been king for a while. He says, this is 620 BC. He says, the temple's kind of fallen into a crappy state of being. So he opens up the checkbook and says, whatever it costs, fix it up. There's no limits. And they go up there and they find a scroll. And they bring it to him. They say, oh my God, we found this scroll and it's got all these laws. And it turns out we've been breaking them for 100 years. And he rips his clothing. And by the way, when you rip your clothing in the ancient world, you probably didn't have a second coat. You couldn't go to, Target and buy a new shirt, right? So the king could, but the normal people, ripping clothing was a dramatic act. And so then he has this Reformation. Well, what was that book? We think that book was the D part of JEDP, which is the core of the book of Deuteronomy. It's been preserved. It's been hidden probably in the temple because Josiah's dad and his grandpa were bad dudes. They like sacrificed kids and killed them. You know what I mean? Yeah,
very questionable. Not ideal. Against it.
Are you? Are you sure?
I'm against it, but
okay.
I don't know. You're the one in Minnesota. I feel like your current policing predicament makes everyone wonder.
Ouch. Yeah, it's we're recording this recently after the Minneapolis police officer was found guilty on all charges. So we're happy. I'm particularly, I feel grateful about that. That's 2 Minneapolis police officers in the last few years who were actually convicted. And I live about half a mile from another one in a different municipality where the police officer got off and probably shouldn't have in my, I'm not a legal expert. Don't send me hate email.
I mean, you only study God's law.
By the way, it's a friend of mine's nephew too, that one. I had never met him, but so it's a little close to home. I mean, God's law says don't kill kids.
Yeah, that's what it was more of one of those asides when so many times people will make observations about some negative aspect of a moment in Israel's history or Nineveh, they're horrible. And then you're like, yeah, but also Dick Cheney made things up, committed large numbers of war crimes to invade Iraq for no reason. And now we act like his daughter is like the greatest thing that ever happened to the GOP just because she kind of likes the Constitution, but probably would like to have less black people vote. But, it's growing edges.
It's growing. Yeah, it's
and Rolf does not endorse nor reject anything I just said. That was Tripp's editorial aside, which began by him taking very sincere. My initial joke, just to
what I see is the fact that the fact that we now have what's clearly a composite text, right? It's composed of different elements. Same with the Psalter. You can tell that different collections from different pieces of Israel's geography and history eventually were merged to form the 150 Psalms. And so I actually think what's kind of awesome about that is that for each moment, they are actualizing the Word of God based on what's going on. They're not changing it. But there's a German Old Testament scholar. His name was Gerhard von Rad. Do you love von Rad? You do, I bet.
I bet I do, don't I? People that like German theologians kind of like von Rad, you know?
Yes, and
because other theologians are probably forced to read him. That's what I'm guessing.
Well, the fact that there's development within the Old Testament, development of doctrine, development of theology, he said this disturbed people who thought the book fell from heaven, right? One author. What he said is all theology is, big German word coming, Nacherzählung, after telling or telling anew. So that the job of every generation is to receive the tradition and retell it for whatever the sin or the brokenness that we're facing in this generation right now, today is. And that's why it's kind of awesome that most of these parts of the Bible are anonymous, that we don't know who J or E or P or D was, and they're mostly probably communities of people. So they're anonymous, but the fact that they did their work and we can in some ways recover it is awesome for understanding how God's word speaks into our moment.
No, I think that's great. And I feel like the source critical work when it goes to Hebrew scriptures is similar to the redaction voices in the New Testament, where you're trying to figure out the actual particular voice of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, because so many Christians receive it through a hermeneutical filter of the creeds or whatever. When it goes to wrestling with, creation, the crisis that comes, how covenants work, and you deal all that kind of stuff, you like to have multiple voices who were all affirmed by being canonized. Yep. And then they have different suspicions, different backgrounds, all that kind of stuff. When I've met people that take the Bible's packed full of different people's perspectives and experiences and voices, but related to the one they understand as the source of existence, that there's a multiplicity of trustworthy voices seems like a asset rather than a detriment.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Which is convenient, because the second thing that's most of your favorite, most offensive things to teach when you're doing Old Testament that are actually kind of awesome has to do with the multiplicity of creation stories. So what's
right? So a lot of times the very first thing, some teachers will organize the Bible canonically. So the first thing you do,
but you have to say your second point with gusto, because you did. So
here we go.
Okay.
There are two. Nope. Actually, make that 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 creation stories in the Old Testament.
Oh,
right.
And you know what? When you say 7, do you think about how special that number is? Because I'm sure it has something to do with Jesus.
Well, it's why I stopped.
It's a cosmic
at 7.
Christ. There's a cosmic Christ collection of 7 stories.
Yeah.
In the Hebrew Bible. Evidence that demands a Richard Rohr Christology. Universal Christ, right there. You should ignore me and respond to your points, but it was a joke. It was
no, I like it. I don't like. So my band, I got a band called the Flesh Pots of Egypt. We're a Lutheran bluegrass band. It's what the Reformation would have sounded like if it happened in Appalachia, right? Well, that's what we are like.
Well, I support. That's a high quality concept right there.
And so we were playing. We play at the Festival of Homiletics, and so we've had the great, incredible blessing to be the music leaders for all the best kind of progressive preachers in America. Will Willimon, Walter Brueggemann, Barbara Brown Taylor, Bishop Curry, and Richard Rohr, and others. So we have to negotiate. What hymns would you like us to play? Here's the hymns that we play that people love. And so obviously the song people love the most is, without question, I'll Fly Away, right?
Well, if you're going to have a bluegrass band,
you better be able to play that one.
Yeah.
It's kind of a standard. It's what we call a standard.
It has that like Gnostic Redeemer myth vibe, but it also, with creative hermeneutics, every biblical scholar knows that hermeneutics is an opportunity.
And the second most beloved song is Are You Washed in the Blood of the Lamb?
That's the second most.
Yeah, people love that. I love that one. So, right, it's got a great melody. It's got a great, you can play, the fancy leads on it. And so we said to Richard, so here's some songs that you could pick from. And here's the ones we suggest. And Are You Washed in the Blood of the Lamb was in there. And Richard said, no blood theology. My God does not demand blood, doesn't wash anybody in blood, and so you can't sing that song. And so that was sort of a drag because he's Catholic, and this is my blood shed for you is kind of a thing, right?
Yeah, he's Franciscan though.
I know, but I went to a Catholic college for my first theology degree, so I went and I said, Catholic friends, what's with Richard Rohr, and he doesn't like blood theology? Can you help me out? And they said, yeah, it's something about the bloodless sacrifice of Jesus. We don't know. That was their answer. So I thought, okay.
Well, now that you figured that out.
When I get to talk to him next, I will ask him again about that. By the way, he is brilliant, and I love him. But the first thing students will learn is there's two creation stories. Yeah. Genesis 1, 7 days. Right? Genesis 2.
I understand.
1 day, right? And so
what's about that?
And so that then they go to the blackboard and you make a list. What's the difference? One calls God Lord. One calls God Elohim. Oh, J and E, right? Or J and P in this case. One happens in 7 days, and humans are created on the sixth in the image of God. And then the other, it's in the day, right? So they make this list, and I quit doing that exercise after one time because getting freshman college students, and the first thing you're going to do is you're going to just throw this thing at them I didn't find very productive. And I got a friend named Brian Stratton. I don't know if you've ever had Brian on. He's a philosophical theologian like yourself. He got put on trial in the conservative little tiny denomination from which he came. He got put on trial, and the question they asked him is, what do you believe about creation? And he said, I believe everything the Old Testament says about creation. I believe all the creation stories. I believe Genesis 1. I believe Genesis 2. I believe Job 38 and 39. And I believe Job 41. I believe Psalm 104 and Psalm 8 and Psalm 19. And I believe John 1, 1 through 4. And they let him off.
Okay, but that worked is impressive. Like,
yeah, well, and he's a preacher, man. So because they put him on trial in a public, and so he preached like this, and he got the place whipped into shape, right? But here's what's awesome, right? So I think it's really important that there's not two creation stories, but there's 7 or maybe 8 or 9. Depends on who gets to define, right? So in Job, right, you get these long creation stories, and then you get Psalm 104. They all have what I would call a one killer perspective that's just necessary for our theology, and some of them have multiple points. One of the things they all agree on against Israel's neighbors, and this is the most important thing, is that creation was not an act of violence between the gods, where one god slew another god and then made the universe out of the other god's dead body, right? Because that's Babylonian. You talked about Ugaritic, right? We joked about that's the Ugaritic creation myth, where Baal slays. So it's nonviolent. And creation, the human role in creation is very positive, as opposed to the Babylonian creation myths where humans are created to be slaves of the god, And then the gods don't like them because they don't make very good slaves and they're noisy. And so the gods think about destroying them, right? In Genesis 1, all human beings are created. By the way, it's all of them together. It's not one human being, then another human being. It's male and female. He created them. That's all of them. And every one of us is created in God's image to have dominion over creation. And what that dominion means is that we don't abuse it, but there are times we have to tame creation. So what did we do when this new pandemic came at us out of creation? We subdued it. Our best scientists went to work and they created vaccines to give us some level of protection against. And so in Genesis 1, every human being is in God's image to have dominion over. Genesis 2 flips it on its head. We are made from the dirt, man. We are of the earth. And God put us here to till and to serve. So rather than to subdue and have dominion, now we're to till and serve. It's a very servant role for humanity. Look around us at the animals. Look at the plants. Our job is to be servants of them. And so you get these two language, subdue and have dominion, to till and to keep. And those words in Hebrew really are to work as a slave and to work as a guard. And then, I could go on. Genesis, Psalm 104, it says, I love this, Psalm 104, trip I see on YouTube, that you are enjoying a glass of wine. And it says in Psalm 104 that God gave us bread to strengthen the bones, oil to make the face shine, and wine to make the heart glad, right? That's some killer theology right there, man.
I'm generally supportive of that option.
Yeah. And by the way, beer too. Homebrewed beer, especially.
It's true. We just opened back up earlier this week. And so after I leave my office tomorrow, I pick up the ingredients for my next homebrewing adventure. And being back in Scotland, I didn't get to move with my very elaborate machine that I've slowly built over time that could repeat stuff. I went back to, basic homebrewing style. And I kind of impressed myself. Like I said, I haven't completely lost it. It's kind of like playing basketball with middle schoolers. You're like,
I like it.
You're like, if you're comparing me to other people that still use the baby equipment, I'm great.
That's great.
So one of the things you mentioned, was this, the way in which the multiplicity of creation stories, and it's not even, just two, sets a certain perspective beside, but if someone who's walked people through this multiple times, when you realize that the scriptures were written, edited, composed, preserved, canonized, where the authorities were even in the know of what they were doing. It wasn't like they'd never read it before, What are the assumptions that so many Christians in kind of Western modernity have internalized, that just like the basic fact sheet by the end of Genesis 3 has already thrown your faith into a conniption? I think that's one of the things that is so striking, is that just because you have creation in the fall, in scare quotes, all up in the first 3 chapters, is it, introducing that to people regularly who self-selected to go to seminary,
right,
means that the church is inviting people into life and experience with God. And that process includes uploading some ideas that even just the most fundamentalist medieval scholar who knew the canon was going to be surprised about,
Yeah. Obviously, the power of the Bible, which was the text for Christian civilization until recently, when now nobody knows it. But, there were always other texts alongside it, especially, the Greek and Latin myths and histories. But something happened where in a dawning, evolving scientific epistemology, Genesis 1 got slid into that epistemology and uncritically was treated as science rather than religion. The easiest way around it is to say the creation stories of the Bible answer questions that science can't answer, which is why and who, rather than when and how. Right? I mean, that's as you know, that's an old standard cliche at this point, but it's really a helpful one. In Psalm 104 also says, there's a bad translation in it, right? It says, look at the sea. It's full of things that God, and it should say, God created to enjoy, to laugh at. That even Leviathan, God enjoys, so that there's a hermeneutic of enjoyment, that God delights in creation. Unlike the Babylonian myths, where their gods really kind of hate creation, and it bugs them. No, the Lord God enjoys you. He laughs at you. He takes delight, because the argument is, if God can delight in Leviathan, the biggest, scariest chaos monster that exists, that means God can delight in you. And, so I think in every one of the creation stories, there's a couple really important theological bombs that the Bible drops on us.
Mm-hmm. Number three.
This is, I got to be careful. Don't get mad at me. For most of the Old Testament, there are no Jews in it.
Okay, but why would you say that?
I think it's an important distinction that what we have in the Old Testament are Israelites and Hebrews. And for most of the Bible, that's what they're called. They're called Israelites, Hebrews, or sometimes, they're called Judeans. And the religion that you have in the Old Testament is not Christianity, and it's not rabbinic Judaism. It's, for most of the Old Testament, it's Israelite religion. So I think it's an important distinction for three reasons. One is it keeps us away from the fundamentalist ditches on the right and on the left. A lot of people have the attitude is, we don't need the Old Testament. It's a book of law, and we got Jesus now, who's full of grace, and so all we need is to do Testament. She's not going to listen to this. I got a cousin who really feels that way. That she's not a pastor, but she just doesn't think we should be, reading or preaching about the Old Testament in church. Then
what if you only preached about John 3:16?
The verse?
Yeah,
I think so, right? When it says 3:16 on a sign, you know what it means, right?
Yeah.
When the bank sign
Christian white supremacy. Oh, or I don't know. Man, I don't know the current numerology well. I'm in Scotland. Why would you listen to me? I hang out with socialists, so it's really bad. It's really bad. But you
know the problem with socialists, since you're living in Britain, right? What did Maggie Thatcher say? Sooner or later, you run out of other people's money.
Oh,
that's a funny joke right there. Maggie wasn't renowned for her funniness. Yeah,
and also, I'm not going to detour, but
you wouldn't go there with me, all right?
No, I don't want to detour things.
So the other ditch, though, on the left, right? So that's the ditch on the right. The ditch on the left is, somebody once told me, we were doing a search at college for a position, and so we had people from the not from the religion department on the search committee, and one person said, well, we shouldn't even read the Hebrew Bible because it's an act of imperialism and supersessionism, because it's a Jewish book, not a Christian book. We shouldn't read their Bible. And of course, so this is what's important is the Old Testament is not a Jewish book in the sense of you don't have Judaism in it. For most of it, you have Israelites. And I teach this with my friend, Rabbi Barry Citron, when we've taught together at Luther Seminary, a Jewish and Christian dialogue class, basically. And he agrees. So what the Old Testament is the grandfather of Messianic Christianity and Rabbinic Judaism. And the parents in between is Second Temple Judaism. So you actually will find the word Jews in the late books, such as Esther. The name Jew comes from the southern kingdom of Judah and the survivors of it that became a religion, not a kingdom. But so what do you have? You have a heretical. I did not mean that. A hereditary priesthood in the Old Testament. But the only way you could be a priest is if you were born into the tribe of Levi. And then what was the worship life? Well, it was priests were butchers. In most religions, priests have been the ones to kill the animals for people. And so it was animal sacrifice. By the way, I'm glad I didn't get born into that reality, because that's icky. And it was a nation. And so then Second Temple Judaism, it starts to transform. And then with the dawn of Jesus and then the destruction in 70 of the temple, the various groups of first century Judaism, one of them won in both religions, Phariseeism. So Phariseeism gives birth to Messianic Christianity. Paul and Jesus and all of Jesus' first followers are Pharisees. And then it also is the one that wins within rabbinical Judaism, which doesn't have hereditary priesthood, doesn't have animal sacrifice. It has a spiritual worship life, just like Christianity. You can go to seminary. It's not a nation. It's a religion, and so on. And so that's why I think it's important. It explains why both religions need what we call the Old Testament and how we read it together with our cousins, the Jews, whom I love. Mm-hmm. And I think everybody should love.
Well, do you think that the scriptures most people have access to or regularly engage are ones that don't have a lot of Second Temple period Judaism in it?
Yes.
Then because of that gap, then most people don't read the New Testament, where it was like a neighborhood of different Jewish expressions. You got the Sadducees, the Pharisees, you got the Essenes, the Zealots,
the Herodians.
Yeah, you got like a stack of them. And then there's an earthquake. And when you get done, the Pharisees merging into what came to be Christianity after Gentile dominance and then rabbinic Judaism. But because those two have such a shared ancestry, the competition kind of leads to, in those texts, more distinction than was real. So like when you said, oh, well, there's no Jews. Well, okay, those familiar with the Bible are like the Jews, they're a main character in the Gospel of John.
Okay, that's why I said in the Old Testament.
I know. I was setting you up for a pedagogical moment.
I love it. Almost all the characters in the New Testament are Jews. The exception being like, the Phoenician woman.
Who's a Canaanite. You got
Romans.
There's not a lot of Canaanites in Second Temple period Judaism.
You got the Gerasenes, right? They're not Jewish because they got a herd of 5,000 pigs, man. And Jesus is so disrespectful of their religion that what does he do? He puts demons in them and they all drown, right? Jesus is not being respectful of other people's boundaries, man.
Well, yeah. You can cancel him.
Exactly. Cancel him. I
know that there's some high quality you could purchase but graphic package of all the graphics for a revival, some all themed on canceling. And it's canceled, and each of the slides, the background of the empty tomb gets more clear. Canceled. You can just see the tomb coming up.
I didn't know that.
I don't know if it's true, but it should be.
We could make a lot of money, you and I, Trick, if we could, but we're not going to. If we could do those video trading cards, which are now the thing, with
the NFT. The NFT.
Yeah.
Non-fungible tokens.
Yes. The resurrection, dude. There's only 50 copies of this.
Oh, my.
Right?
Oh, no, it'd be 220,000. It'd be 220,000 NFTs.
They'd bid that thing up on eBay.
Non-transferable.
Right? It's only you can see the picture of when Jesus comes back to life.
Well, right? I saw someone that was doing an NFT for their indie film where if you have it and you shoot it up while you're in the movie, you see extra things that other people don't see in certain scenes.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. I was just like, are you just asking every youth minister to use this next Easter as a sermon illustration?
Exactly.
Like, do you have the NFT? Now, what is NFT for a high quality like a non-falsifiable transaction? That's what happens on Easter, Rolf. Just you get the NFT of the Holy Ghost up in your piece. You know he's been redeemed, and now you can look at the world with as it truly is through the light of the NFT resurrection perspective. You just hold your phone up, you got the NFT action, all of a sudden the prolepsis of the resurrection reshapes everything that's there.
We got to get to that. Easter's only 11 months away.
I know. Well, if somebody's going to listen to this, you just tell us, like, we'll tweet about it.
Just cut us in.
Yeah. If you can come up with the new creation filter through a non-fungible token. Number 4 is nobody agrees on how many books are in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
But what, like, if you were putting out, like, we're going to bet on a number of options, what are the most popular options? And then,
so everybody should have a good study Bible. Yeah. And if you're serious, you should have more than one good study Bible, but especially one that you read. And so, like, any good study Bible, I got here the HarperCollins Study Bible because my teachers wrote a lot of the notes in it.
My filter covered mine up. I have the new Oxford annotated.
Yes, that's the British one.
Yeah, I had to get it I got mine redone. My parents paid some ungodly amount of money to have a new leather cover attached because I had all the notes from all my school loans in it. So I feel like
it's true.
I don't know what I'd be more sad to lose. Well, that or my Martin guitar in a fire. Like, that's the two things that I would be like, or the recording of this on my computer.
Here's what they did to me in seminary. I had my Bible was an Oxford annotated RSV. And then as I graduated in 1991, the New Revised Standard Version came out. So I started over, and then I was driving my daughter to college, and she goes, "Oh, I forgot a Bible." She went to a Lutheran college, and I said, "Well, here, all my notes were in that one." And so then I started again. It's sort of depressing, but so at the start of a study Bible, you're likely going to get a list of different canons for the Old Testament, and it will say this. It will say Jewish Bibles. So in the Jewish Bible, there's like 20 scrolls, something like that. I might be off by one, because all the 12 minor prophets are in one scroll. There's a scroll of 5 that includes Song of Solomon, Ruth, Lamentations, Ecclesiastes, and Esther. And, Samuel and Kings and Chronicles are one scroll. All right. So Protestants have the same books as the Jewish Bible, but we count them differently. So we have 39, right? And then Orthodox and Catholics have a lot more books in their Old Testament. We either call them the Apocrypha as Protestants or deuterocanonical, because that sounds cooler, right? Or sometimes I just say disputed books. And within different Orthodox churches, they disagree with each other about which of these extra books. And the Catholic Church at Vatican II removed some of their extra books. And so that's why I say nobody really can agree on how many books are in the Old Testament. So, for instance, my study Bible that I use says HarperCollins Study Bible, including Apocrypha, deuterocanonical books. That is the books that are most commonly in Roman Catholic and Orthodox Bibles. Here's the key. After the split with Christianity, Judaism had to decide from a pile of scrolls, right? So you didn't have a bound book. You had a big pile of scrolls. But then Christians started putting things in a book. This is called a folio. The idea was you sew the binding together, right? And that's what makes a book. Well, once you do that, Just think conceptually. I thought we just had a pile of scrolls, people. No. Some are in the book and some are not. And after the exile, some of the Old Testament story got written down in Greek, not in Hebrew. So after the split from Christianity, the Jews, the rabbinic Jews in the Pharisaic movement, had to decide which of these piles of scrolls are we going to sew into the book now and make it official, right? And they decided only books for which there's a Hebrew original. So the other books don't have a Hebrew original. And that was their dividing line. And then, so that created then essentially two big traditions. And then the split with Orthodox and Roman Catholic, little difference. But then the Reformation comes along. And I happen to have here, because of a class I taught this morning, oh my God, it's heavy. This is my facsimile edition of the Luther Bible, that Luther translated the Bible into German, thereby creating the German language practically, really solidified it, right? And he had to decide, all right, I'm translating here. What do we count as Old Testament? Because I've been kicked out of the Catholic Church and I don't want to be part of their dumb club anymore. And so, because it was a capital crime to translate the Bible into the vernacular. One of the charges against Luther was he dared to translate the New Testament into German. That's a crime punishable by death, by the way, in the Holy Roman Empire. Yeah, man, right? They didn't mess around about translations. So Luther had to decide, and he decided that he would go with the Jewish judgment. The rabbinic Jewish judgment about what's canon. So he went with their judgment, and all the other Protestant churches followed.
One of the things about that, what's in gets debated, also problematizes naive and simplistic accounts of authority and scripture in the same way like nobody wrote anything did. When you realize how much human involvement is connected to what was selected, how it's translated, what gets preserved, what counts as authoritative. When you see more and more fingerprints on a text you thought was pristine, at what point or in what way do acknowledging and looking at the character of the fingerprints make the text more sacred to you as a scholar and person of faith than when like just noticing it was something like, oh, let me get that screen wipe out. We got to eliminate this. Can we harmonize this? Can we figure out this? And I'm really glad there's a part of Turkey with a arc on it.
Do you remember the Seinfeld episode where Elaine is dating like a doctor who is a ear, nose, and throat doctor? And he describes throughout the episode the tongue in just this really sort of gruesome scientific detail, right? And then he goes in to kiss her and she's like, ah! Right? And it's a hilarious episode, like all of Seinfeld, built on nothing. Genius. But that's what you're talking about, is when you get closer and closer, do you have that reaction? Or is it miraculous? Is it still, right? Is it the human ear, nose, and throat? And it's a miracle. For me, it's that way. But, one of the things I was taught early on in seminary, I went to seminary during the Reagan administration, for people who want to date my age at 55 currently. One of the things we were told that, so when the authority of the Bible comes along and they're debating it, the church, and I think this was after the Protestant Reformation, so maybe this was Protestants had this argument. Well, at one point, the Old Testament was just consonants, right? The so-called consonantal Masoretic texts. Then the Masoretes, they were the ones who preserved this. They lived in a couple locations, but the location that really won was on the Sea of Galilee. They stayed there in the northern part of the Holy Land. And about the year 1000, leading up to it, but our oldest complete manuscript is about the year 1000. Their famous head scribe pointed the text. He added the lines and dots that make up the vowels. And that they also do other syntactical things. And so the church, I remember this, the church had an argument. Were the dots and dashes inspired by the Holy Spirit or just the consonants? Because that's a fighting problem, right?
I mean, if all scriptures God breathed, okay?
Yeah.
And the phrase God breathed is not British, which would be God breathed without the vowels, then I feel like that kind of necessitates all the dash marks being inspired at a different time. This is how you know how holy and perfect the Bible is that the consonants got dropped at one point.
Yeah.
And then everyone's
degree
like,
of difficulty, man.
yeah, what do we do with this? What do we do with this? And then the Holy Ghost is like, check out my remix, add the dots. And then
it's like Taylor Swift redoing all her stuff.
Yeah. And now we know that God really has authority over it. So King James translated it. That's why it's authoritative. So authorized version with vowels, consonants, and the gay king translating it in like Shakespeare cover band.
And it means, I think it's helpful for Jewish Christian relations, right? The Holy Spirit was inspiring those Jewish Masoretes about the year 1000. That is, the Holy Spirit works among Jews too. That's kind of a helpful little bit of anti-Semitism.
Yeah, you're like, could Luther have leaned into that awakening?
He should. Well, he wrote that one really nice thing about the Jews, and then he wrote a bunch of other crap.
Yeah, well,
and as a Lutheran, I reject all the other crap, and it's not just one essay.
No, it's not. It's really,
everywhere.
He always said he was simultaneously a sinner. So
yeah, he was right. That's our theological anthropology. As Lutherans, we are fully sinners and fully, not half and half, 100% each, baby.
Yeah. So if Luther tried to pull off Wesley's anthropology, things would have gotten a lot worse. But he was thoroughly grounded in his depravity in a very particular way.
When my wife and I were first married, I'd say to her, "How you doing?" And I'd say, "How are you?" And she goes, "In bondage to sin and cannot free myself." And that's right. That's how we're doing every day.
Yeah, you're like, well,
sinful and unclean. How are you? Sinful and unclean. So anyway, that's why if you go to a wedding at a Catholic church and they read something, you're like, that's not in the Bible. What's Sirach? Yeah. What's the wisdom of, what is this? And then, so it is interesting though, that the same disagreement does not happen among the churches in the New Testament. Every major flavor of Christianity has the same 27 books in the New Testament. Yeah, there's some flaky ones out there, but Catholics don't have extra books in the New Testament, and so on.
When I think of whether or not it was a good idea to, keep the Apocrypha or not, I feel that as a process theologian, you get these two questions. One, you get a text. If you keep it, you get a text that's like really explicit about creation out of nothing. But you also get a dragon.
Yeah, right.
And so I can't decide, like, do you go, there's a dragon in the Bible, so kind of Lord of the Rings is closer to canon? Or do you go, that Maccabees bit about creation is uncomfortable, and
right.
I don't know if I don't even want to have to deal with it. I can just say I'm Protestant. And
yeah, the problem that happens is, you were talking earlier about this gap. It's a gap of essentially from like 450 to the year 0. So you're reading
like
along,
between the end of Hebrew canon and
the
religious context in which Jesus shows up.
Yeah, I mean, so you're reading
Second
along.
Temple period.
They get to come back from exile. The Persians are in charge. They rebuild the temple. Jesus is born and there's Romans everywhere. I mean, what happened, right? And so the historical books of Maccabees are a nice narrative that at least fills in some of that so that you understand why it is, like we were talking about. How did you get from Israelite religion to first century Judaism? But I used to have a PowerPoint of like the 10 most important things that happened between the two testaments. But I can't remember what was on there anymore, except for things like Alexander the Great conquers the world and dies, and then his empire splits into two, things like that. The Romans take over,
There was a lot that took place in there.
Yeah.
And that's just in the geographic area of the globe that the Hebrew and Christian scriptures are connected to. All right. So what is your fifth thing? Offensive things you learn in seminary that are also kind of awesome. You decide at the very end, your fifth one, you want to talk about God, which you've already stole the Bible multiple times. You've falsified or problematized most of their probably basic commitments. And they're like, well, at least I have God,
So there's a tradition in the Bible that really starts with the prophet Hosea, but then really goes all the way to the New Testament, where God, the covenant relationship between God and the people.
Yeah.
There's many metaphors for it. Here's a covenant relationship, human marriage.
That's a good one.
Let's use that as the analogy.
It's biblical.
And so God is the husband and the people are the wife.
Oh.
And in the New Testament, right, God is God. Jesus is the head of the bride of Christ, right? You know what I mean?
The church.
So, but it really gets gross as you delve into the texts that are about it. It gets really gross and it's offensive. And here's a theologically technical word, yucky. So Hosea and his wife Gomer enact this. And we don't know much about Gomer. But in tradition, she's either a prostitute or a religious prostitute or a very serially unfaithful human being. We can't know. But chapter 2 of Hosea is a dramatic poetic section where he says, well, here's what I'm going to do to you. And basically it's, I'm going to abuse the shit out of you until you return to me. And then she does, and it's all happy. Right. So Hosea is saying to the people, God is our husband and we are serially unfaithful. And so judgment's going to come just like when a husband abuses a wife. So, by the way, so I wrote a funny book once with some friends called Crazy Talk, a Not-So-Stuffy dictionary of theological terms. And I used to say, people would say, oh, I bought your book. I'd say, well, how many copies did you buy? Because you should have one for every bathroom you own, because just set it on the back, right? The Lutheran Church publishes a devotional called Christ in Our Home that, you pick up every quarter at church. And my friend John Kilbride used to call it Christ in Our Bathroom, right? Because that's where his wife would put the devotional. Too much information about Carrie, I know. But so they wouldn't use... Christian bookstores, some of them wouldn't use this book because we use the word suck in it. So under the definition of sin, it's number one, why we suck, that is the sinful condition, and two, how we suck, that is sins we commit. I think that's a pretty good definition of sin. I didn't write that joke. Sin, why we suck and how we suck. And they said, because you use the word suck, we will not sell your book in our pristine Christian bookstore. And I'm like,
you know why,
dude,
right? You answered the question how and why, but not what we suck. And because you didn't answer the what question, they implied something in it, and their heteronormativity really problematized the presence of your book.
Yeah. And I'm like, have you read Hosea? Have you read Ezekiel? There's parts of Ezekiel and Hosea talking about the marriage metaphor that you shouldn't sell in your bookstore because they're really gross. But I think nobody reads. Like, so the chapter in Ezekiel on, do you know what I'm going to talk about?
There's like hung like a donkey. You got cooking on shit. There's a number of Ezekiel's wild.
Well, Ezekiel, I had a student write a paper on Ezekiel once, and then the students all would come to my office in groups, and I would say, what's the thing you learned from writing this paper? What's the major thing you learned? And so we'd start there, and she says, I want what he was smoking. That's what I learned from Ezekiel. But he has this long parable. I should know this. It's chapter 23, right? It's the parable of Ahalah and Ahaliva, or something like that. I don't know how to pronounce it. And it's basically the northern
kingdom. Don't. I really feel like everyone else should give themselves permission not to know.
Aholah and Oholiva. And they're each a woman representing the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. Ezekiel says, you're so unfaithful. You go after men that are like what you just said.
Well,
you can repeat it.
Well, no, it's like they're like hung like donkeys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what it says.
I used to know it because, and I don't know if you will believe me or not, but I got in trouble in undergrad at a Baptist
no kidding.
campus. The more conservative campus ministry group was like the Baptist Student Union that Trippin was in leadership. They don't really believe the Bible. And so they put on this debate about the inerrancy of Scripture where it was like two fundamentalists debating variations of, inerrancy. So I got a t-shirt printed up with that Bible verse on it and went to the debate, and the story spread. And then one of my Bible professors in the religion department, which, a lot of religious schools, the people with PhDs in religion are the edgiest professors on campus.
Probably.
And, he's like, what did they say about you having a animal prostitution t-shirt? And I was like, it wasn't an animal. I was quoting Ezekiel, and, people are around. And so they don't have much reference for what just happened. He goes, the donkey balls one?
Yeah, exactly.
And I was like, yeah, like, but it's like about their testicles and the volume of ejaculation.
Yeah, it's Ezekiel 23:10. It says, and they lusted after her, and she lusted after her paramours there, whose members were like those of donkeys, and whose emission was like that of stallions. Now, by the way, one of the things that English translations do, is they protect you from what the Bible actually says at many places. And so if there's a verse like that that's going to offend somebody, they will put it into phrases that no one uses. Emissions, members, right? Now, there are very good English words for those terms that they could have chosen. And there's many places in the Bible where they do this. Like even when they describe Gomer, they call her a wife of whoredom. So that who uses? When's the last time you ever heard the word whoredom? And the answer is never. Right?
Yeah,
no one uses it. I was reading the Song of Songs today with a class, and you're probably familiar with the Babylon Bee. That's a satirical Christian website. Friends of mine know the owners, and I'd love to talk to them, but because they get canceled, right? That they've been banned from Twitter because people don't know how to read satire, and they think that when they write this, that they're actually believe what they're writing. But they've taken verses from Song of Songs, and they've put them on the little heart candies. And so it's what Valentine's Day from the Songs of Songs, like, your breasts are like gazelles, right? It says, and it's a hilarious concept, right? But even the Song of Songs, by the way they translate it, is protecting you from the actual text by using archaic words. So instead of perfume, it uses the word nard, which of course has its own set of jokes, right? But no one uses that word, right? And so they should just use perfume. You know what I mean? But the Bible translators are such, I knew Bruce Metzger, who was the head translator for the RSV and the NRSV. And I'll just say that dude was a proper gentleman, proper gentleman. And so he is not going to give a translation that is going to offend any proper old lady or uptight young man. One of the great things is to get in with a really good Old Testament professor, and like Paul. Paul says, I can't remember, is Philippians where he goes, all that stuff that I gave up in order to receive Christ, it's all shit. That's what he says.
Yeah. It's usually rubbish or whatever.
Yeah, come on. Paul used the word. What are you afraid of? Right? Say what Paul said. So yeah, it's
I mean, in part of the Protestant impulse, and obviously it hadn't pushed all the way through, that some people in authority want to mediate. Those receiving want mediation, because what you don't want is like actual encounter and access, right? So like,
correct.
Depending on your location, both parties have a desire to prefer rubbish rather than shit, right? Like honesty about the human situation. And then, they'd rather have it be, they'd rather have the day be the Sabbath or worship where they could show up, rather than this is the day the Lord has made, being the way you actually show up in a moment and in the present.
Yes.
Like both of those are distancing activities.
So here's what you did though, right? I think this is what you were doing. There's a debate about the authority of Scripture. I'm going to put a funny piece of Scripture on to problematize the debate. And so you get a t-shirt that says that, and you bring it, and you don't say anything, right? You're just sitting there, but you've problematized the debate, essentially asking, is even this part of Scripture God-breathed? The marriage metaphor for God is terribly problematic because it normatizes the way we have constructed gender roles in highly sexist ways and projects them onto God. But here's why it's still kind of awesome. That God is a God who is so faithful that God always receives back and takes back faithless human beings as individuals and as communities. And so God's fidelity is so huge that I can read it as my teacher, Diane Jacobson, no relation. She wrote an article saying, I'm a part of two reading communities. On the one hand, when I read the metaphor as a feminist, I'm just terribly offended. This is horrible. It's got no place. But I also am a member of a reading community called the Church. And as a member of this community, I love this. What it says to us about God's faithfulness and forgiveness and reconciliation. So I think that to me is a how I can still say, yeah, but it's really bad, but it's kind of awesome.
I mean, when you think of the way that the image of marriage between God and Israel, and that as a covenant, like how would you delineate the way the historical context informed, say, Hosea's depiction and what was getting itself done in that context, assuming a kind of a more patriarchal context, one that's more legally mediated in different ways? Like, how does understanding the situation it arose in allow you to, one, recognize the problems of the cultural moment, but then receive the affirmation more gleefully or something like that?
Well, my beloved teacher, Gerhard Forde, always used to say, when theologians get in trouble, they make a distinction. Right? And so you can quickly rifle through your own catalog, trip, and realize, yeah, I do that all the time. I'm going to make a distinction. By the way, Bandit the Podcat, who shows up on many of my podcasts, and he asks questions, by the way. I will ask you three of the questions that just last week he asked Walter Brueggemann.
Oh, okay.
So, and then I'll finish the thought. The first question is, what is your favorite animal, Trip, and why is it a cat?
It's absolutely not a cat. But I have a bad relationship with cats. My least favorite's horses. I've been thrown off a horse twice. favorite animal. Definitely dogs for cuddling, fish for pursuing.
Oh, I like it. The second question is, what's the weirdest place you've ever taken a nap?
I can basically sleep in almost any situation, and sometimes I don't choose to go to bed. A couple of years ago, when we were allowed to travel and such, I was in an event seeing, I probably shouldn't say their name, a mutual friend who's much more accomplished than me, giving the same talk for the third time in an event we were speaking at together. And I definitely started snoring in the back until I was pushed. And that was really awkward because I wasn't intending to. I was just like, all right, here we, and I don't snore like a mouse. I'm like a choo-choo train.
I love that. The last question is, do you think that the snake gets too much credit for the fall in Genesis 3?
Hell yeah, the snake gets too much credit. It was a manufacturer's defect. Like,
yeah.
Do you think when you're dealings with human beings that there's even a lot of exaggeration that the snake was being crafty? All it takes is a human being with a little prohibition, and we will cultivate whatever narrative is necessary to justify us being duped to do exactly what we want.
Exactly.
Having
right.
been up close and personal with people in the pastoral's council room, I feel like a clarity about anthropology. It makes you more confident in a gospel that lets you know you don't have a lot to contribute right now. There has to be that moment.
That's exactly right. So that's what those are Bandit's questions. And
how long have you and Bandit been partners?
Well, we had a cat for a long time who died last July, and
like in the middle of lockdown.
In the middle of lockdown.
Oh.
And so Bandit, after about a month, I said to my wife, okay, go get another cat. So, Humane Society or whatever rescue, it wasn't Humane Society. That was the previous one, but we went through a society and he's a good cat, but he likes to show up on podcasts. He's very interested when I'm talking to a screen. So we were in the middle, though, of talking about, so I said theologians, when they're in trouble, make a distinction.
We make distinctions.
And biblical scholars look for historical context as a way to solve if you don't like what a text says, try to find some historical context, essentially where you can make it say something else, right? And it's really funny to watch, for me to watch my colleagues do backflips sometimes because they don't like what a text says. And I can't give you an actual example because it would be a betrayal of sorts. So, sometimes historical context is helpful. In this case, it might actually make it worse, right? Because some people, like Renita Weems has a book on this. They say that the concept of sexuality in the Old Testament was that the male head of the family owned the woman's sexuality. I don't think that's actually right, but it is a perspective that it was not necessarily based in mutuality. The best marriages in our postmodern 21st century Western world, the best marriages are very, very mutual. My wife's good at some things. I'm good at some other things. We share some things. Sometimes I'm off and she really needs to pick me up, but other times I do it for her. Because I'm in a wheelchair, I do a lot of things that would have been traditionally considered the wife's marital role. I'm the main cook. My wife runs the snowblower, right? And she loves it. She loves to run the snowblower, because who wouldn't? So the best marriages are mutual. And I don't think there was that kind of mutuality. But here's how I can spin it. There isn't that kind of mutuality in the ancient marriage, and there isn't in your relationship with God. God has chosen you. God didn't ask you first whether you wanted to be saved, whether you wanted to be elected, whether you wanted to be called to follow Jesus, right? God just chose you. John 15, you did not choose me, but I chose you, right? That's from a Lutheran perspective, especially. And I would think from a process perspective, right? And this is where there's a certain amount of convergence. That's really good news.
I mean, if you were distinguishing between the two, part would be a debate that exists within Lutheran thought. Process side is definitely on the Swedish Lutheran side of things, where the activity of the gospel, it becomes normative for your understanding of God's relationship to creation, right? So in a sense, the gospel comes to each moment because God, as the one who loves in freedom, gives God's self moment to moment. And then like there's different types of responsiveness, but it's not the election has to do with synchronicity, not selectivity. Synchronicity of God and the part of creation, the individual who's being called, versus selectivity where like it's
Double
God's decision. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing that Lutherans were better at dancing around than Calvinists, and then Thomas Aquinas and Augustine, right?
Yeah, if you're going to get clear, and then you end up being like, no, double predestination, total depravity, and if you want me to make things worse, just taunt me. Like that's the.
Well, Augustine and Thomas and Calvin all arrived there, and Luther refused to go there. He did admit, yeah, if you just in a strict logical fashion push the doctrine of justification by faith to its absolute most extreme, you will end up there, but just don't go there. I think with any, that's true with any theological doctrine or dogma. If you take one and just push it, you end up like Rudolf Bultmann, crazy Lutheran, or you end up like Calvin, who, as my Calvinist friend says, he only burned one guy, and he begged the guy to repent before he burned him.
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, as someone who, prior to COVID, walked past John Knox as they went into their office each day. Protestant hype takes many forms. And like at one point I was in a faculty meeting and they mentioned like how long ago it had been since someone was burned at the stake, but the number was really small. And they were like, well, in the West, the last person burned at the stake was burned here. And I was like, fun fact. And I don't know if this is accurate. This was the probably creeping trip out at faculty meeting, but they were like, yeah, well, there's a divinity student who wasn't too sure about the Trinity. And I'm like, has there been a divinity student that wasn't like, if you get the Trinity right, that means at some point you had to realize every children's sermon example they gave you was a heresy.
Exactly. Everyone.
And all the people that invented the language from it all thought the others were heretics. So they just kept adding lines to a creed. Well, they were drawing those distinctions you're very fond of.
Yeah. Well, no. Yeah.
They were like, you see this distinction? It's not important right now. And like you say, did the will get replaced? No, fully human. But it's a divine will. Did the soul get no? There's is a fully human soul, but it's divine. And
exactly.
Like, so when's the clarity get here? No, we're just against these distinctions. They're uncomfortable. The hypostatic union. You're like, what's that? That's the word we invented to say both these things at the same time and say it's not contradictory. And we hope you enjoy it.
And it's perichoretic.
If you just say paradox and perichoresis enough, all things just like hum,
one of the changes in theology, in North American theology that's happened since I was a seminary student is all the activity on the Trinity. Essentially, when I was back in seminary, it was like, okay, today's the lecture on the Trinity. If you have a problem, just go back and read Augustine on the Trinity. Otherwise, we're just going to talk about Jesus. So that was my seminary. And now the graduation essays from my students are always like, I'm deeply moved by the concept of the perichoretic indwelling of the Trinity, that the Trinity is itself a community in which the persons are different, but they mutually indwell each other and they penetrate each other. And then pretty soon they're talking in ways that make you think of the Song of Songs.
Well, and then you say, finally, it's biblical. Like, that's what. Are you surprised that the people that came up with the Trinity also came up with a way to read softcore porn and call it scripture? You know?
Yeah. Guess what? The most biblical commentary from the Middle Ages are on what book?
They love the Song of Songs.
Exactly. Because, okay, you're the third born son. Sorry, you got to go to the monastery. Right?
And they were like, but have you drank from the fountain recently? And they were like, yeah, I mean, everyone gets water every day. But they're like, no.
Exactly.
This is tangentially related, but my 13-year-old tonight, we were reading in Luke 7, where, you know, Jesus is at the Pharisee Simon's house, and then a woman comes in and is like washing his feet with his tears, you know, that whole thing. And Simon the Pharisee gives this whole like, oh, she's a woman of ill repute. Jesus is like, you're being ridiculous right now. To whom, you know, little is forgiven, that whole bit. And, you know, one of the things that stuck out to me, mostly because Elgin asked, he asked first, you know, like, what is all the weird language, you know, around depending on the translation. I didn't remember what he was reading. It was some one that was more, you know, a 13-year-old would read. And the language was like, a seductress, sinful woman, you know, some weird line, right? He's like, what's that mean? I was like, well, she was like a prostitute. He's like, what's that? And then I'm like I'm explaining, he's like, so someone just pays her to have sex? And I was like, yeah. He's like, why? And I was like, what? And then I'm like explaining the situation, who ends up at, and I give him all these stories. And I'm like answering questions, and it gets done. And he reads it and he goes, well, then why didn't Simon just recognize that if a woman's in that position, then it's probably not because she wanted to do it and she's just a horrible person, right? Like, he should have been more reasonable. And so like he says this, and I'm like, looking at the text. The text itself doesn't give this option, right? Like and I was like, you know, Elgin, I was like, what strikes me, because you're asking these questions, which are the natural progressive questions asked, right? Like, understand the culture situation, but the text assumes Simon, the Pharisee, is righteous and she's a sinner. That's not the debated part. And Luke, the gospel, is full of opportunities where social, political, cultural, economic location is explained in a systemic way, and Jesus takes sides. I was like, here it just kind of presumes it. And I was like, I feel like this is a high quality kind of progressive Christian that deep down loves Luther move. I said, the question would be, when Jesus responds and says, that when he looks at her and says, your sins are forgiven, then what was he referring to? And he goes, well, she showed up because she knew her sins were forgiven. And now I was not anticipating this response, but leaned into it with gusto.
Yeah.
And I said, yeah. So Simon invites the rabbi and stuff over and is showing some modicum of respect and stuff, because in his mind, he's still playing the righteousness game. Right. So he can evaluate this other person that shows up and all this kind of stuff, and is negotiating because there's still something to give. This woman shows up and she has been forgiven, which is literally, the text acts like it's already happened. And so her whole encounter is a display of what happens when you realized that the most true thing about you is you're God's beloved, and you didn't get to contribute to that affirmation. You just get to receive it. And for whom much is forgiven, right? Like, this is what it looks like. Extravagant response. Not because you have to, Simon, but because you get to. I'm playing it. I haven't decided if this exegesis is good or not, but
it's great.
It played with thinking about something we talked about earlier, is on the left and right, there's this whole obsession around cancel culture. And underneath that is the same type of Simon response, right? Where he's looking at Jesus like, well, let's be honest. Like, if you were going over under on the sinful, you know, I've done better. And the funny thing is, like, he actually has, right? Like, in the same way in the prodigal son, the prodigal older brother's like, I didn't leave. You didn't give me a chicken, right?
I know.
And
Didn't get a goat.
yeah, like can't you just let me have a little fun with my friends? But underneath those is that you were still judging yourself. And so what you're speaking out of as Simon or the older brother is that dynamic where you're still assessing yourself. You think you have something to give, contribute, and all this kind of thing. And what the woman in the story symbolized, someone that like realizes that I didn't have anything to contribute, but I already possessed everything I could ever get. And boom, this is what it looks like, Simon. And, come to the party or whatever. I was like, that's a challenge, I think, to the cancel like the cancel culture anxiety that people either like take sides on or go left and right on. A gospel assessment of it is something like the predicament is what occasions the anxiety when you have something to prove, perform, or demonstrate.
So, yeah, it's exactly right. I mean, it's the story of the older brother. My beloved teacher, Don Jewell, had just an incredible lecture that I basically would rip off. And when I got to teach the whole Bible, when I taught college and students, it would always deeply connect. He came to a church to do an adult class on it. He'd look and says, you have been brainwashed by the church when you read this parable into identifying with the younger brother. Not one of you is the younger brother. All of you are the older brother. Look where you are. You're in church right now. You probably serve on committees. You probably volunteer. You probably go to Bible study. You don't have anything in common with the younger brother, but you're very much like the older brother, who is the only interesting character in this story. The father's pathetic. The younger son's a manipulative SOB, and the older brother is so responsible. They don't even invite him to the party. Where's he? Oh, he's working. We should invite him. No, he likes to work. He doesn't like to have fun, right? And then he walks and he hears noise, right? Hey, what's that noise? Oh, it's a party. Your younger brother is back, and your dad killed your 4-H cow to throw a party for him.
4-H cow. Now that is a culturally narrow reference that's high quality if you know it.
That was Don Jewell. The little calf that you fed with the bottle. That one, your dad killed him, right? And then, of course, the story ends with God is throwing a party for sinners. And the question for you is, are you so hung up on your own righteousness that you won't join the party? Mic drop. And, class ends. I had a student just go, I'm so mad. I don't want class to end today, right? And, because some of us have that little brother or little sister. Jewel would talk about another professor named who once in a sermon from pulpit said, chief of sinners that I am the worst of sinners. And Jewel goes, God, his sins aren't even interesting. If he confessed his sins to me, I would fall asleep out of boredom. It's true, by the way, about you would not even be interested by his sins. Now I know some other people.
Oh, yeah, I think that is a follow-up question we don't have to go to. Of all your fellow scholarly friends, which ones have the most entertaining, juicy sense, namely ones that are not publicly known right now, so we can discuss them?
It's true. When I stole this bit from a pastor, like all my bits are stolen, right? All right, we're going to talk about the penitential psalms right now. And continuing the practice we've just worked on in the trust psalms, I want you to turn to your neighbor and tell them your deepest, darkest, unconfessed sin. The shock and the stop for a minute, and then okay, we're not going to do that. It always works,
Well, I had a friend who put on a event in Los Angeles that was kind of like interactive, odd, artistic salon style events, right? Like, so they would have a theme, and there'd be like different artists and speakers and stuff. It all gets woven together. At the beginning, they had the Ark of Desire, right? And when you came in, and it's like filed in, so like you're in a booth basically for a minute, and you're to write on this little piece of paper a fantasy you would never own. And then they get used later towards the end of this kind of interactive experience. And I don't know if other people were told this was happening, so say something exciting, but I'm boring. That's what I've decided, is other people's had these fantasies that they were like, what's the one fantasy? You know, like, I'm just like, wouldn't it be cool to write the systematic theology book that like most of the not fundamentalist seminaries think is the best one because it really resonates with people across the church. Like I was like,
that'd be fantasy.
Like, that'd be so awesome. And other people are like, I wanted to walk down the street and someone I've never met before walk up, kiss me, and we like bang in the alley, you know, and there's like tons of these like things. I was like, oh, that's what you're talking about. I totally missed wherever this was going. I in my head, I was going through my giant goal to have a near ubiquitous systematic theology.
By the way, when you were talking about is it the Syrophoenician woman? I can't remember.
Well, in Syrophoenician and then Canaanite in Matthew. Yeah.
Okay.
Same story.
Have you seen the Monty Python bit where, I think it's Monty Python, the bit where they come in on Jesus in front of a crowd, and he's clearly, you figure out he's just told them the parable of the Good Samaritan. And somebody goes, so he's a Samaritan. Yeah, he goes, that's the point. He's a Samaritan, and he's good. Have you seen this clip? That's like what's going on with the way people want to read then that story in Luke, right? Which is, right, she's Canaanite. And then, of course, they do the whole identity politic cancel move, and it's hilarious. So
here you go.
There's a lot of prejudice against Samaritans, which is terrible. But I'm sure I speak for everyone in this room when I say that there are loads of really nice Samaritans.
Yeah, some of my best friends are Samaritans.
Yeah, me and the wife went on holiday to Samaria last year, and they were lovely people.
And then how it ends with, well, of course, a Samaritan would never help him. It's a Samaritan wanker, right? You know, that's how it ends. It's the greatest bit ever.
We went on holiday to Samaria. All right, so all right, the last question that is connected to what you talked about when you brought up the Ezekiel passage. When it goes to the editing and things, this is not, and how you translate the grittiness of the Bible, this is not just a Bible thing. The Homebrewed Christianity Guide to Jesus had a story at the beginning of it that I didn't know was edited until the book release party when I was reading the story, in which I say at the beginning of the book that when I was in undergrad, it's really a philosophy and religion major, with a roommate that did the same. We argued and we came up with a postmodern version of casting lots. They decided who was the replacement for Judas by casting lots, and we figured that's a good way to settle a good disagreement. Like, what does the Holy Ghost want us? Like, how should we answer the question? We got to cast lots. And the postmodern version was we just play a video game, and whoever won was whatever they wanted was the solution the Holy Ghost wanted. And so he had a lot of debates, like the greatest hair metal band, like Guns N' Roses or Stryper. Like, does God want the Bible thumping bumblebees or not? Like, you know, things like that. And I list off a number of them. And one was, did Jesus have, did he blow a load while he was sleeping? It was changed to nocturnal emissions.
See,
did he like bust a nut while he was sleeping or something like that? You know,
Bruce Metzger.
I don't remember what I put in it, but it was definitely not nocturnal emissions. And then I'm sitting there reading the book printed for the first time at a book release party in a brewery in Oklahoma. And I say nocturnal emissions. That just, I get it's more sanitary, but it's just visibly offensive. in ways. I also made a joke in the book about the kingdom of God. And if you get rid of the G and its kingdom, you get rid of the cock and the crown, patriarchy and hierarchy. And I thought it's high quality because the one God is Abba, and the parental imagery reshapes how you understand divine and law, like law, all this kind of, it's a nice little fun. Then I make the joke, drop the G, get rid of the cock and the crown. They changed it to phallus and the crown. Okay. Again, I get but I feel like phallus and the crown, bad. Drunk dude Scott? Said in the crowd, because I've made the joke cock in the crown on the podcast. Yeah. He goes, phallus in the crown, it's cock in the crown. And I was like, thank you. I'm realizing how this is different than what you were expecting. And he goes, phallus in the crown. I just think of the mascot for Burger King, except his head's a penis. And he just volunteered this in the middle of my book release party. And ever since then, I've looked more when I hit approved changes on books, because there's no explicit discussion.
Was that what's his name? Or
this was the people they had go through it, because Tony has said later, like, I was not involved in taking this out, and though I probably would have said yes just because of how thoroughly frustrating it was to you to have a book with your name on it that used the phrase nocturnal emissions and phallus.
Yeah. We all need editors to protect us from ourselves at points. That's good.
Yeah. I have one very factual error that's wrong in the first printing of the book that has been brought up to me multiple times. And I was I didn't even type it. In explaining what Second Temple period Judaism is, like, whoever it was like, can you add more? And I gave a long answer, right? Like, what do you mean by this? If it's for normal people, they might not know.
Right.
Well, and I'm explaining Israel's history with empires, and then which ones took out temples, and how you get to a second temple. And the way it was edited was like Second Temple period. And this is like an aside to help you know what that means. It was something like, all I know is it meant Egypt destroyed a temple.
Yeah.
And I was like, and I didn't know that was like what was in there, till other people read it, and they were like, Trip, who do you think has destroyed a temple in Jerusalem? And I was like, what? They're like, yeah, like, you said Egypt did in the book? And I was like, what? No. Yeah. And I'm like, Egypt didn't destroy a temple. Like, they had them in bondage, and God liberated them much later, goes for a king, and then goes for a temple.
In my comprehensive exams, right? And that's the most stressful part of grad school, is the comprehensive exams, right? The dissertation, that's much easier, but the generals, right?
Yeah.
So we had to write one on Israelite history. So I wrote it, and then you defend all of them at the same time with the whole Bible department sitting up above you, kind of, right? I felt like it. And I had the Old Testament refers to both the Babylonians and the Assyrians as the Chaldeans. And so Jim Roberts, and he was our scariest teacher, the smartest teacher we had, J.J.M. Roberts, man. That dude is bright. He says, read this passage for me. And I read it, and he goes, so you refer to the Chalcedonians. Throughout the whole thing, I called the Chaldeans the Chalcedonians. And they all start laughing. And I still don't know what's wrong, right? He goes, who are the Chalcedonians? I said, and now I'm thinking, oh my God, it's the Babylon. Am I wrong? I said, it's the Babylonians and Assyrians, right? He goes, oh, I'm really glad, because I thought some early Trinitarian heretics destroyed the temple. And then I realized what I had done, and everybody's laughing at me. So I've made mistakes like that in very embarrassing situations.
Oh yeah. I because I'm dyslexic, I for years didn't know that there was a difference between divine immanence and the immanent trinity when it goes to spelling. I thought they were
funny.
the same thing. And then I had a paper on Moltmann, and the professor was like, "Do you know that these are two different words?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "The immanent trinity and divine immanence." And I was like, "Yeah, they're immanent and immanence." He's like, "No, there's more difference." And I was like, "I have no idea what you're referring to." It was like that, like the number of times I realized that there were E's on both sides of the I's in Schleiermacher, and I would just go back and forth. And I'm like, well, I know it's here. It's same thing. I was like, I can't believe. I know conceptually the difference between immanent trinity and divine immanence, but
which is the paper you wrote that you sent it to the guy who said it was great and the teacher gave you a bad grade?
Oh, that was the one I wrote
Phyllis
about
Tribble?
Terrence Fretheim.
Yeah.
That Phyllis Tribble was thought it was adequate.
But Terry liked it, right?
No, he told me, he's like, I'd never traced, he's like, it was great to read a theologian reading everything. You traced all these threads through how I exegeted stuff. And I was like, oh, this is so good. She's probably going to suggest I publish this. And Phyllis was like,
that's hilarious.
Do you enjoy bees? I was like, no, I don't do those.
That's the best. It's a great story.
At least one perk of UK grading is there's like an A is getting a 70, but you get from a 70 to 100. And, so you can give, you can give more clarity on really good papers, because it's kind of like, if it gets to an 80, you're like, oh, this is like, you should take them in the PhD program. And if it's more than that, you're like, you should just go publish this, but you can give affirmations. And the negative part is Americans are not used to being told, no, you got a 63. That's really good.
Yeah.
They're like, no, it's a 63. You're like, yeah, it's a 63 out of 100, but that's kind of like a B plus.
Yeah. That's funny. I didn't know that about.
And you grade them blindly, so you don't know who you're grading, and usually two different people grade them, and then you have to reconcile your grades, and it is permanently awkward for someone. This might just be that I spent more time as a minister than a professor, but the desire to be to see papers as me honoring our relationship as like teacher and student, and then I read it and write back to you, but knowing you and our interaction. And I'm sure it affects my hermeneutic for grading, and I don't lose a lot of sleep about that. But I found that if I don't know the person and aren't engaging it as a person, and you're just asking me what I think of something, I'm not very nice. I'm just like, in a vacuum, I really don't like this. But if I knew who wrote it, my context for reading gets a little more generous.
If you got 5 more minutes, you said one thing in the podcast I wanted to follow up on, and that was your Martin guitar.
Oh, yeah.
So in Crazy Talk, the essay on creation.
All 7 creation stories in one.
I list, here's what it says, right? It's, how creative types are: finicky, temperamental, difficult, sometimes a bit prima donna-ish. Can you imagine God hanging out before anything exists saying, I just can't work in this environment? How could I be expected to be creative with such dull surroundings? I want light, I want sky, I want air, I want water, I want plants, I want animals, I want people. I want a 1970 0018 Martin guitar.
Amen.
I know, right?
All the guitar players in my family have Martin guitars. And
0018 for me.
I basically judge people that spend so much money on a Taylor. You're like, if you wanted it to sound, like a Casio, then you could have just got one.
Yeah. What model do you drive?
D28.
Yeah, so big dreadnought.
Yeah, I got it for my college graduation gift from my parents and Alicia. They were like, but
That's
my
pretty cool.
brother and my dad, they all have Martins and we all play guitar. So the biggest judge for an acoustic guitar for someone that's mediocre, not someone that like all 10 fingers cooperate in unison to make beautiful magic, but this is an object I use to associate to things I'm attempting to sing that I hope decent people while inebriated enjoy. Like then it's like, how does your open G chord sound?
Right.
And Martin open G is significantly better than Taylor or Gibson's open G. And in the context of campfire, its superiority reigns, which is the optimal conditions for group sing along. So
yeah, it's true. I also have a Yamaha handmade, and I have a Seagull, which is a Canadian.
Mm-hmm.
What had happened is I had bought a campfire guitar for myself because I didn't want to bring my now 50-year-old Martin out to a campfire where the front is hot enough to melt the lacquer on the guitar and the back is cold enough to crack it, right? Because that's campfires in Minnesota. So I wanted a campfire guitar, like that cold night we were sitting out in Tony's backyard, right? So I bought a campfire guitar and I took it on a flight, and Delta Airlines destroyed it. I was the last guy off. So what had happened is it's coming up in the little lift, and it slipped, and so it went crash. And I was getting off, and this guy goes, "Oh, is the guitar yours?" And I went, I brought a guitar. He goes, "Ooh, it didn't sound good." It was shredded, man, just shredded. I said, "Here's the list price at the store I go to." And if they paid the list price in a check, which is maybe slightly immoral of me, because nobody pays list price for guitars, right? So I went and I said, "Okay, I got this much to spend." And I got it down to a Martin and the Seagull. And I said, he goes, "Yeah, if you want to pay $500 more for a name, buy the Martin. The Seagull is the same guitar at the store." I really like my Seagull, and I don't feel bad playing it at a campfire because it's not a Martin.
I have one Canadian guitar. I don't know if they're related to Seagull, but at one point I thought so. It's a Norman.
I don't think so, but I'll check.
But it is a Canadian company. And it is not finished. And so because I've had it so long, the whole place my arm goes on it, it's kind of like worn down. And then the hole's gotten bigger over time.
Yeah.
But it's got if you're playing acoustic and mostly background, occasional percussion with your clicketiness in a full rock band, that tone, but it's not like Martin tone if you're just playing an acoustic guitar and want your guitar to fill up the space.
One of these years at SBL, I am going to give the paper in the Psalms section or the reception history section about the reception of the Jordan River in American music. And Ooh. I'm just gonna bring the band, because Joel Lamont, he plays some banjo, and what's his name at Columbia plays some mandolin. So there's some people in the guild. Paul Myrie from Wabash plays bass. Maybe you'll have to sit in too. It's really, I don't really care about the paper.
It'd be the most fun. It'd be the most fun thing to put on your CV.
Right. I mean, right. But people would like that session a lot better, right, than the paper on the reception of the marriage metaphor yet again.
Are you serious? Because I thought my favorite thing to do for 4 days every November is listen to people read papers. I would never choose to read personally. And in order to understand it, I needed to actually read and not have read to me, followed by people that actually read that paper in advance with more knowledge about the specific subject than I have, writing responses where they signal how informed they are by leaving out all the necessary information for me to appreciate the entire 2 hours. I think that I'm just so glad the AAR exists. What would we do without that?
My colleague Mark Thrantveit made a really interesting observation years ago. Mark's a brilliant teacher. He's so creative and funny in the classroom, which bugs me when people are funnier than me. That's something I do not tolerate well. But he's funnier than me. And he says, we come here. Most of these people are probably good teachers. They're probably really good pedagogically in the classroom. And then in front of each other, we read papers, which is the worst pedagogy there is. And I've thought about that for years. And I think it's terror. It's much safer to read a very controlled paper to colleagues than to get up there and be entertaining and have a truth claim and put it out there and then have the claws come out. You know what I mean? I think
you're completely accurate. And I mean, I even get that vibe regular. I can tell rather quickly when interviewing someone if they really want me to ask questions about the book I read the entire time so they can then tell it to you, or if it becomes a conversation that goes back and forth, because I'm like dyslexic enough that reading a paper is more dangerous than just making things up based on my outline. AAR, I'm just like, when I do papers, I like have my outline and I have like the quotes and stuff I'm going to use, but I've usually worked on it enough. I'm not going to read anything because I'll skip a line and become nonsensical. Just skip a whole line of my paper. And because of that, I watch people while I'm talking. And the response to people who realize he's not reading, he's actually talking. He is now doing a story as an aside. Oh, he's actually using that. I'm now uncomfortable. And some get into it. Then you see people get uncomfortable. And I was thinking, like, all of you work at places that train preachers.
Right.
And
so why? Yes.
If
why
there's that protective, I think it makes sense. That's a good diagnosis that, one way to not have to use a declarative sentence is to read to us about dead people's ideas.
Yeah. And I mean, you don't want to be the tall poppy, right? So you stay within the genre and the genre is read a boring paper. I think we need lampoon sections. I think it would really help. The MLA conference of the medievalists which is in Michigan every year, English professor said the highlight is the lampoon papers. And we're so easy to lampoon, that you'd start off with, the unknown scholar who 6 times in her paper refers to, as I have argued elsewhere, right? When I start hearing that, I'm like, we don't know who you are. Who are you? And or Matt Skinner says he just wants to start banging the table and go, point, thesis. What is your thesis?
Yep. But I get the form thing. I think ministers do the same thing where the liturgy, the seasons, all that kind of stuff becomes ways they don't have to bring their own questions and doubts and things into their life as a minister. Academics do it in a different way. And honestly, if you cut hair or a dentist, you do it, right? Like there's always these different ways we end up wanting to perform our kind of vocational role rather than figure out how to be human in any moment. It's just doubly ironic when it involves reading a paper about Job's existential angst.
Well, yeah, it's very important to remember when you're studying the prophetic word, the performative nature of the prophetic word, right? It's like, do you see what you're doing? I once gave, when I was a pastor, I gave a Bible study at the high school youth convention for the district. And the Bible study was interesting. And one of the kids in the youth group said, that was really good. Why don't you preach like that? I'm like, I'd get fired. I mean, if I brought a leaf blower in, because I brought a leaf blower in, right? And I'd get fired if I brought a leaf blower into the sanctuary. I'm not going to be interesting. But she was dead on, right? She was dead on right.
Yeah, you don't want to be interesting. The important lessons to learn while you're in seminary. So if you're thinking of the sixth thing you learn in your Old Testament class, that's depressing, but secretly awesome. It's
the prophetic sign acts that the prophets did. They're not a horrible thing that students learn, so I couldn't put it in the list. But right, we put the one in Hosea's marriage, but Isaiah walking around naked. There's so many of them. My favorite is Jeremiah with the dirty underwear, right? That one? I mean, that's a pretty damn good story.
And middle school boys understand.
Yeah, I got one. Parents of middle school boys understand too. But, to hold it up at people's face and go, this is your glory, O Jerusalem. Deal with that, right?
You're like, okay, but it may be my glory, but is it everyone's glory? Like, do you need to show it to them?
Yeah, it's covering your glory.
I really appreciate you hanging out to share with us the glory of your pedagogical, experiences here. So what is it that you're working on right now?
Well, I'm finishing an introduction that's really late, but I'll have it finished by the end of the month. And then a book on humor and preaching, which is not a book about how to be funny, but really what we can learn about telling the truth from comedians
cool.
and from comedy. And then I think I'm either going to do a book I've written 2 chapters for and quit years ago, but I'm ready to finish it now. It's called People Suck and Other Biblical Truths, which I think will be perfect for this podcast, right? Because biblical truth number 2 is that people suck. Biblical truth number 3 is God loves people who suck, right? If that's on the title, man, they're not going to sell it in any Christian bookstore.
Well, luckily, Christian bookstores are just taking a nosedive these days.
Yeah,
you'll be able to come at them from another angle. And,
I don't know who will publish it though.
Who knows? If you'd like suck, changed out dramatically at the end for nocturnal emissions, then.
Well, that's the thing is, I wrote, Kate Bowler, right? And so I had confused in her story that she wrote in the New York Times, right? When the guy comes over and says, "Oh, just wanted to let you know everything. I believe everything happens for a reason. Oh, tell me what the reason my wife is dying." That story, and she writes, "People have a hard time simply saying that is awful." I had remembered her as saying, "People have really time saying that just sucks." And so I had a version. I told my editor for an article in a book. Right. So this is something no one will ever read. An article in a collection of essays on the theology of the Psalms, right? No one's ever going to read it. And he said, well, David Howard, Baptist, right? He goes, well, I'm not sure. Put it in there and I'll see if I can get it by the editors. And I went back and checked the source and she actually just says that is awful. So I didn't have to put it, but that's the nervousness of certain people around certain words. My mom didn't like it that I used the word, so,
Well, I've tried to ruin my witness enough that no one asked me to step into it. And as someone who was a very effective for liberal mainline Protestant minister in Los Angeles, and they're like Tripp's our conservative friend. He's all pious. He reads the Bible, prays, baptizes new Christians who've never been religious before in an ocean, deep, I'm not thinking I'm having the "Are you really a Christian?" problem. Then I made a movie. A couple of years ago called The Road to Edmond, a buddy road trip comedy, where this guy gets in trouble for being welcoming to someone that comes out in their youth group, and gets told to go pray about it for a week. And then my character hits his bike with my van that I live in, and they end up on a road trip. So it's like planes, trains, and automobiles with really bad religious jokes. And there's a scene in the middle of the book, because I wrote it, in the middle of the movie where the kind of breakthrough where he's trying to negotiate his spiritual relationship and the doubts and challenges or whatever. And he ends up drinking with my character. And then after they're drunk, I get him high. I roll a joint with the Leviticus page out of a Bible. The man shall not lie with another man. And I'm like, he's like, is that my Bible? You know, but he's never drank before. So he's drunk. And I'm like, yeah, don't worry. Puff, puff, pass Leviticus. I'm thinking this is a high quality joke. It's based on an actual youth group person rolling a joint with, and I catch them and I know them and their parents all smoke weed all the time together. So it's like, you just don't do this at youth group. And also I said, why are you rolling a joint with the Gospel of John? You got a whole Bible here. Can't you like get the God doesn't like gay sex bit? And he goes, what? Puff, puff, pass Leviticus. And I was like, that's hilarious. I want to put that in a movie. You know, I was a joke. And I was like, but please, come on. I know this is California. I know your parents and y'all are cool, like whatever, but this is just not now. Are we clear? You know, when I'm doing this, I'm like, this is a hilarious bit. Like, we got to have them roll a joint. I don't think anything about it. Others did.
Yes.
I thought this is a high quality, funny joke.
It is a joke. That's a high quality joke, by the way.
And I said, well, you know, in the actual Hebrew Bible, it talks about eating the scriptures. I thought this was an alternative, inhaling them. I had been at church in California 2 years or so, and the first time Alicia and our Elgin, who's like at this point 2 years old, go back to North Carolina for a family thing, but it was maybe Easter or something you can't skip if you work at a church.
Right.
So I'm like by myself for a week, and all these families from church are inviting me over. I go to a youth group family's home, and we're eating dinner and stuff, and the dinner wraps up. The teenagers disappear to go do whatever they're going to do. Parents are like, hey, do you roll? And I was like, roll what? They're like, do you like to smoke? I'm like, I'm kind of into cigars. And they're like, what kind? You know? And I'm like going like, they have to be real explicit before you say anything, because this could be held against you. This could be, in my mind, I'm thinking a fundamentalist, you know, who like pulls a beer out, but is waiting to see if you drink it, but they haven't even opened theirs. It's like a test, or, you know.
Yeah.
And we go down into their basement. They're very affluent family. They do a lot of hard work called day trading with their inheritance. And they have a kegerator with like some of the best beer on. So they're like, we'll get you a ride back. Don't worry. You're all by yourself. You haven't been here long. So we're like drinking this beer. And then later they just pull out a giant bong and start pounding that thing. And I'm like, I don't want to get cross-faded. And they're like, you know what that is. So they're like, you're cool. You don't mind if we do. And I was like, no. And the whole time I'm sitting there like, this is the weirdest thing. I cannot wait to get home and tell my family in the South that, like parents of youth were just like blazed up with their kids running around outside and trying to get me to join. Same family. A couple of months later, my dad comes to visit. One of the other ministers on staff, me and dad in the backyard smoking cigars. I get an email. Concern about me using tobacco on Facebook being bad for her kid, because they might start using tobacco. Same mother who was like, do you roll? Like, that is the most California only experience, that they're like, I cannot believe you'd smoke a cigar, but do you roll?
Yeah. It's, Lutheranism is a pietistic tradition, although we have pietistic Lutherans and non-pietistic movements. But so I was a new pastor. I went to Catholic college. And so 4 years out, I'm out of seminary now, but they've been working for 4 years. And they decide, all my buddies, Catholic buddies, decide they're going to go to Vegas for the Sweet 16 weekend. and they invite me. And I'm like, yeah, no, I can't go. What, you can't go? You got to work? I said, no, I don't got to work, but I'm a Lutheran pastor. I can't go to Vegas to gamble. They're like, what? Because that's the only vice priests are allowed, right? Priests, the one vice they're allowed is they can gamble, right? They got the bingo. And so they could not understand. No, Lutheran pastor, can't go to Vegas.
They got the bingo.
They do.
I know that's a title for something. They got the bingo.
Yeah. Well, a friend of mine, Catholic, oftentimes this is what happened in the old days. I don't think it happens much anymore, but you take a new call. You're the priest. You're assigned to a new church, so you move into the manse, the parish house, whatever they call it there. And then you get a visit from somebody in the church, and he comes in, he says, I run the bingo. Don't mess with it. I run the bingo. And so this is a form critical experience that they have, because some priests want to come in and control it. And it's like, so the Italian guy in the church comes up and explains to you how the mob works in that particular church.
It's whatever happens, when you get a president for the first time in the military industrial complex visits, and you're like, yeah, but I just won a Nobel Peace Prize, right? I know. And the gateway to peace? Purchasing military equipment. I don't know if you know that.
That's exactly right.
All right. Well, I've had tons of fun talking to you. Very glad you came back on.
Good luck editing.
I don't know. I feel like this is one of those episodes that people are either going to say, wow, it was long, or they're going to say, I just love it when you get to hear people that just sound like they would choose to hang out with each other if they weren't on the podcast. And I just want everyone to know, like, I would choose to hang out with you, You
might have to cut the part off about sins not even being interesting, but from Matthew, edit that part out. Just because they wouldn't be, by the way. Oh my God.
But what if he wants his sins to be interesting?
That's the problem.
See, all three of my good ones I use regularly when talking. That way people are like, man, like for a pastor's kid, he's got some excitement underneath if that's what he shared out loud, who knows what? Like,
I know.
He's got some good ones.
When I worked at this one church, I'd call on this woman. Her name was Elsie. She was about this high, old lady, Elsie. And she cooked coffee. She didn't brew it. So she would boil water, put the grounds in it. She'd cook coffee. And she heard voices. She told me, I hear voices. And so while she's cooking coffee, she'd look at me and she'd go, so whatever the voices in her head were saying really funny things about me all the time. Because then she'd look over and she'd start laughing, and then she'd point at her head and go, So I've always wondered what the voices were saying about me.
That is amazing. Okay, so last thing I'll say, like, this made me think of this, which there's almost no chance this will be in the podcast. But so I was working in that mainline Protestant church in Los Angeles, and there are three of us that rotated preaching, and then we had like different, sections of assignments. Someone comes into the office and says that they need an exorcism.
Yeah.
Like, they just rolled up and they were like, you know where you go for an exorcism? The United Church of Christ. And
that's where you go.
The other ministers apparently had been checked in on, and they're long-term California residents. And they're like, Tripp, he's been in the South. He knows evangelicals. I'm sure he knows how to do this. So I get this message on, like, beep, beep. And they're like, Tripp, so-and-so's coming down to your office. The secretary doesn't know this is weird, right? For an exorcism. You just want to meet him at the top of the stairs. And I go, there's a guy just like sweating profusely, mid-40s, very nice suit, like clearly a successful individual, or signaling so, sweating just buckets
Yeah.
And he's like, Reverend Fuller. And I was like, yeah. So you can do it? And I was like, do what? Like, I mean, I know they said you were coming here. He said, an exorcism. I was like, what? An exorcism. I am full of demons. And I was like, right now? He's like, yes. And all of a sudden I'm like, all right. And I said, well, I need some more context. I can't come at demons generically. I need to know how we're doing this.
I can't come at demons generically.
I don't know. I've only seen TV shows.
Well, I know it's a great line though.
So he proceeds to tell me how he's like, there's the demons of greed are in him. And he's like, become a workaholic, destroyed his family, become an addict, sabotaged his friend. Like, he's going through this shit. And I'm like, well, if you're going to have a demon, that seems like a reasonable one to pick for this, right? Like, when he said he's stuck with greed, he's like, for real. And he's like, I've tried to get rid of it. And I think I need to be washed in the blood. And I was like,
I got a song for that.
I was like, well, we don't have blood on the ready, but
yeah,
I got a baptismal font.
Yeah.
And so I'm like in the foyer because I came down these stairs. So I'm like, come over here. And I basically rally up, and I put my hands on him and I'm just like praying and stuff. He starts convulsing and things, I'm greed, all that kind of stuff. And I was like, greed, and I'm kind of like, because greed was cursing at me, I got feisty. And I was like, greed, I need you to shut the up in the name of Jesus. This guy froze. And I'm not going to use the guy's real name, pretend name, Andrew. And I was like, greed, I need you to listen to something. Andrew is made and known and loved by God completely. I need you to get the out in the name of Jesus. And like, I start like lecturing this demon and he's like quivering, and I'm getting pissed. And I was like, I demand you get out in the name of the Father. And I like grabbed some water out of the thing and threw it on his face. And he went, and the Son and the Holy Spirit, I threw some, and he's like, he starts like shaking, falls on the ground. God gets up and he's like, that worked. And I was like, Andrew, I'm so glad it did. I have a card here of a pastoral counselor. I think it would be really good to have a hedge of spiritual protection if you followed up. Just like for maybe a session or two to like create new healthy habits and cultivate the fruits of the Spirit in your home and in the workplace, maybe. And he's like, oh, thanks, man. My friend who is the therapist later says, did you send some guy named Andrew here? Yeah. He goes, like, he really likes you, but he's got some stories. And I was like, yeah, they might be true. And he's like, no. Like, he was telling me you were throwing water at him and it was singeing demons. And I was like, yeah, my batting average when it goes to demons, 1,000.
By the way, that's, what it says? Badass, MFer, servant of God. Right there. That should be on your business card, man.
It wasn't one of those moments where I was like, I just won. I was still, the entire time this was happening, I was processing that it was happening and that I knew the other people on staff sent him my way. And then I realized,
did you ever look around and go, am I getting punked? Is somebody going to come out with the camera?
I had thought of that. But then I realized if I'm going to do this, I don't want to fail. So I got to get into it,
Yeah.
It's one of those like lead me not into temptation, but since I'm here, sin with gusto, right? Like, it's like, well, I'd prefer not to be led into a situation where someone needs me to take out a herd of demons and stuff. But if I am, I'm not going to hold back. Like, I knew halfway through, no, we didn't have any pigs around, but we were next to a cliff. But I knew halfway through, this is sad. at some point I'm going to use this in a sermon illustration. So like that did help me level up, you know. It was one of those like, this is really weird. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna preach on I could even use this in a book. And
yeah.
No, not yet. The one I'm working on, I have a book idea I've been working on called Godsplaining, and I'm gonna tell the story, probably not with as much vigor as I just did, but as a way of talking about the way kind of a mythopoetic cultural frame is also connected, that kind of like logos part to the bios, where you have all these cognitive mechanisms and stuff for generating religious engagement and such in the world. And most of the time we ask questions about God, we're acting as if the proper answer is one or the other, but when they go together, anyway, like it does me no good to tell him, your mythopoetic framing of this encounter is one I don't recognize as a highly enlightened modernist, you know. And then you kind of impose whatever your grid is on it, but it's not as if there's not a there. But then the idea that one grid gets at it more, and Godsplainers tend to be people who impose the mystery of all existence in the depth dimension of reality into whatever their grid is, be it an inerrant Bible or scientific reductionism. So there were some mansplainers because they're Godsplainers.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. But I definitely want to use the casting out a demon story in it. I was only worried that it would backfire in that I would have to do it again later if people were like, Tripp knows how to do this.
I've had other friends have similar experiences where they had to do it.
Yeah,
I haven't. Those moments, like you said, that feeling of leveling up that you must have had. I think all of us have had moments when we think, I am absolutely unequal to what is about to happen. There's no way I can do this. And then you do it. One thing I would never do is volunteer to be the local police chaplain. I've had friends do that, and they have to do the worst things, man. You know, there was a teenage girl killed in a car accident. And so he's called to the scene, and the mother arrives at the scene. And the police officer says, whatever you do, you stop her from seeing this. David is in this position now where he has to stand between a mother and her dead daughter for her own sake. Right? Wow. Don't volunteer for that kind of our life is complicated enough without volunteering to be in those situations.
Yeah, I've had friends that were police and fire chaplains with very interesting story, like the kind of stories where, like, when you hear it, you get uncomfortable for them. You know,
I think the rewarding part of the job for the people I've known that have done it is helping the officers work through, being the chaplain to the officers who've had to do something very difficult.
Oh yeah.
But obviously being the notifier, working for free to be a notifier like that.
I mean, considering all the issues with police at this point, I think it would be good to have a high quality chaplain in the ranks.
That's true too.
To help them cultivate a different relationship to, I just maybe new openness to implicit biases training and how you account for it and all. I mean, like, you know, those individuals definitely deal with some intense things.
Well, that's what I'm saying is, like you said, we need a high quality chaplain. That's why I'm saying I would never do it, because I'm not high quality, and we need high quality people in that role.
Yes. Well, yeah. All right. It is 1:15 in the morning.
I can't believe it's this late. Hey, great to talk to you. Let me know when it drops. Seriously.
Well, since this one will have more editing than the average one, I will. It may be longer than shorter, but Matt, if you're just make sure you pay attention.
Thank you, Matt.
It was great to see you again.
Always. All right. Take care, brother.
All right. Bye. Whoa, you made it all the way to the end of that giant Bible cast with Rolf Jacobson? Man, then clearly you want to go check out his book, The Homebrewed Christianity Guide to the Old Testament, where there's more wonderful goodness like that. Thanks for listening, and remember, share the brew, my friends. I mean, share it. Tweet about it. Post it on your Facebook. Share it with Instagram. Email it to your friends. Sharing is caring.